Chapter 753. Although Jianqin knew about the ambitions of the Tsar family, he did not think that the Grand Elder would actually tell him about these matters without any reservations. This made him feel stunned. However, he also knew that the reason why the Tsar family invited him to join them was because they wanted to control the Radiant Saint Master Union through him. This way, not only would they be able to control the Radiant Saint Master Union without shedding a drop of blood, they would also be able to obtain an expert as powerful as the president of the Union. This would greatly increase the strength of the Tsar family. However, with Jianqin's personality, he would definitely not allow himself to become a chess piece in the hands of others. He clasped his hands and said, "Grand Elder, thank you for your kind intentions. However, I'm afraid that Yang Yutian will have to disappoint you." The gaze of the Grand Elder suddenly became sharp, like two unsheathed swords, as he stared at Jianqin. He growled, "Yang Yutian, are you still not willing to become an eternal elder of my Tsar family?" "Yes." Jianqin stared at the Grand Elder without any fear. The two people's gazes stared at each other, as if they were about to collide in the air. After a while, the Grand Elder finally retracted his gaze and sighed, "Forget it. Since you have already made up your mind, then this old man will not force you. Yang Yutian, you can leave." Jianqin silently retreated. Only the Grand Elder remained in the room, still sitting there and drinking tea. What a pity, what a pity. Such a genius. Yet he cannot be used by my Tsar family. After a while, the Grand Elder let out a soft sigh. Shortly after, a piece of jade appeared in his hand, which he crushed without any hesitation. At the same time, within the 8 great clans, the expressions of the 8 great clans changed. They all took out 2 pieces of jade from their space rings. Do it! After walking out from the Great Elder's palace, the Tsar family's patriarch who had led him here was nowhere to be found. Jianqin could only follow his memory and walk towards the great assembly hall alone. Jianqin arrived at the main hall without any obstructions. He noticed that the few upper echelons of the Tsar family had already left. Other than the 2 guards guarding the main hall, there was only Yang Ling sitting there alone. Jianqin's eyes flashed. He understood that the Tsar family's attitude towards him had changed a lot. He said, "Mr. Yang Ling, let's go." Yang Ling stood up and walked out of the empty main hall. His face was grim as he followed Jianqin silently towards the Zaha family's main gate. Even after Jianqin left the Zaha family's main gate, no one came out to send him off. Similarly, no one tried to persuade him to stay. Returned to the Federation, Jianqin and Yang Ling boarded the carriage and said to the coachman, "The luxurious carriage with the symbol of the Radiant Saint Master Union turned around and headed towards the Federation." In the carriage, Jianqin sat cross-legged with his head lowered as he pondered. His eyes flickered with uncertainty. As for Yang Ling, he was still expressionless as he sat there with his eyes closed. During this trip to the Tsar family, not only did I reject the matter of becoming an inner elder of the Tsar family, I also found out about the future plans of the Tsar family from the Great Elder. Unknowingly, I have already stood on the opposite side of the Tsar family. The Tsar family will definitely make a move against me. In the following period of time, I must be more careful. Jianqin secretly thought. He did not fear the 8 great clans, but he had to be careful when facing the Tsar family. The Tsar family was an existence that was equivalent to an ancient family. I must quickly become a 7th rank Radiant Saint Master. Once I become a 7th rank Radiant Saint Master, I will leave this place. The matters between the Tsar family and the Radiant Saint Masters are of no concern. Jianqin secretly thought, but soon after, he thought of the last words of the Great Elder. "Yang Yutian, I hope you do not forget that the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union is your master. Although the relationship between the 2 of you is not deep, the president values you very much and has great expectations for you. He even sees you as the future pillar of the Radiant Saint Master Union. Do not disappoint me." Thinking of this, A trace of hesitation appeared on Jianshin's face. At this moment, the carriage that Jianshin was in suddenly shook violently. It rapidly came to a stop. Soon after, a clamorous noise came from outside the carriage. Yang Ling, who was sitting beside Jianshin, suddenly opened his eyes. His figure flashed out of the carriage, while Jianshin sat in the carriage as steadily as Mount Tai. His soul had already seen the situation outside clearly. At this moment, Yang Ling entered the carriage and said, "Master Yang Yutian, the carriage was moving too fast. There was an accident and a child was injured. Let's go down and take a look." Jianshin said indifferently. Then he and Yang Ling came out of the carriage at the same time. They saw a skinny little girl who was around 11 or 12 years old lying unconscious on the ground. Her forehead had been injured and fresh blood had dyed her entire face red. The little girl wore cheap clothes, clearly not a rich person. Beside the little girl was a plain-looking, middle-aged woman in simple clothes. She knelt beside the little girl and sobbed, my daughter, please don't let anything happen to you. You're my only daughter. If anything happens to you, how am I supposed to continue living?" Jianshin frowned slightly when he saw this. He looked at the driver with a reproachful gaze and called out, "How are you driving?" The old man driving the carriage paled slightly. He said with a trembling voice, "Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, this little girl was naughty. She ran into the middle of the road herself. Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, please save this little girl. This little girl is so pitiful. Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, please don't leave her in the lurch. Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, this pitiful little girl was injured by your carriage. You must save her. There were many people on the street, so quite a few people gathered in the surroundings very soon. Many of them spoke to Jianshin. At this moment, the little girl's mother knelt before Jianshin and constantly kowtowed. She begged, Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, I only have one daughter. She's my life. Please save my daughter. If anything happens to my daughter, I don't want to live anymore." Jianshin helped the middle-aged woman up and gently said, "Auntie, don't worry. I will definitely save your daughter." With that, Jianshin directly arrived before the unconscious little girl on the ground. Blood constantly flowed from the girl's head, forming a small puddle on the ground. Jianshin stared at the wound on the girl's head for a while, and a strange light flashed through his eyes. Afterwards, he raised his right hand slightly, and a ball of gentle radiant saint force slowly gathered in his right hand. The ball of radiant saint force was no longer gentle. Instead, it possessed a sharpness that only other radiant saint masters could sense. At this moment, something happened. The little girl's mother gently pressed her left hand against Jianshin's back, and immediately a cold presence surged out of her hand, entering Jianshin's body. At the same time, a short sword silently appeared in the woman's right hand. She slashed it towards Jianshin's neck with lightning speed. All of this happened in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, and there was no sign at all, causing many people who were watching the show to be unable to come back to their senses. "Be careful." Yang Ling's eyes narrowed. His gaze suddenly sharpened as he called out to Jianshin. He then charged towards the middle-aged woman. Even though Yang Ling was a heaven saint master, the middle-aged woman was just too close to Jianshin. Coupled with her lightning-fast speed, Yang Ling was unable to save her in time. Just when the woman's short sword was about to stab Jianshin's neck, a white streak of light flashed. It actually shot towards the woman's forehead at a speed several times faster than the short sword. It was actually the radiant saint force in Jianshin's hand that had condensed into a white streak of light the size of a raindrop. The short sword stopped 3 inches away from Jianshin's neck. A bloody hole had appeared between the middle-aged woman's eyebrows. At this moment, Yang Ling had also arrived. He directly struck the middle-aged woman's back with a palm filled with saint force. Immediately, the middle-aged woman's body was thrown far away. At the same time, the unconscious girl on the ground suddenly opened her eyes. She opened her mouth slightly, and a needle-sized weapon shot out from her mouth. It directly shot towards Jianshin's forehead. Jianshin's eyes flashed. The weapon from the girl's mouth stopped 3 inches away from him. Under the control of Jianshin's mind, it slowly fell into his hand. It was a finger-sized sword. It was pitch black and had clearly been poisoned. Jianshin stared at the sword in his hand without blinking. His eyes grew brighter and brighter. "You're looking to die." Yang Ling flew into a rage. Saint Force surged from his fist as he mercilessly smashed it towards the girl on the ground. The girl's eyes were calm. She directly leapt up from the ground and opened her hands slightly. Saint Force surged from her hands and collided with Yang Ling's open fist. Bang! With a muffled sound, surging waves of energy erupted from where Yang Ling and the girl clashed, causing cracks to appear on the ground. Yang Ling's expression changed slightly. He staggered back a few steps and stared at the girl, who did not seem to be 12 or 13 years old, in disbelief. He cried out, "Sixth cycle heaven, Saint Master!" Suddenly, over 10 people who had come to watch the show charged out from the crowd. They all stabbed their short swords at Jianshin. "Master Yang Yutian, be careful. They're assassins." Yang Ling bellowed as his face became stern. A huge, fiery red sword appeared in his hand as he directly charged at the assassins. 6 of the assassins immediately grabbed Yang Ling, while the rest charged at Jianshin. Their eyes were cold, but they did not give off any killing intent at all. Jianshin finally shifted his gaze away from the sword in his hand. He calmly stared at the assassins charging at him and sneered. He softly murmured, "Whatever. I'll let you test the power of my radiant arts." Ever since the battle on the boat, Jianshin had spent over 10 days in the Union to continue comprehending the radiant arts. As a result, the power of his radiant arts had become even greater. "Rain of the sky," Jianshin murmured. The radiant Saint Force in the surroundings immediately gathered toward him. The speed at which it gathered this time was actually several times faster than before. In an instant, countless droplets of light surrounded Jianshin. Chapter 754. Countless droplets of rain gathered around Jianshin. Every single droplet was condensed from powerful radiant Saint Force and radiated with a sharp presence. Afterwards, the countless droplets of rain shot toward the incoming assassins as streaks of white light under Jianshin's control. The assassins all swung their short swords to block the attacks of the rain. At that moment, the droplets collided with the short swords, producing a series of clanging sounds. Most of the assassins were Earth Saint Masters, while the rest were Heaven Saint Masters. Every time the Earth Saint Master assassins came in contact with the droplets of rain, their bodies would violently tremble. The seemingly insignificant droplets of rain were terrifyingly powerful. Arg! An Earth Saint Master assassin was struck by a droplet of rain, which directly pierced through his body. The intense pain caused him to involuntarily cry out. Not only did his movements slow down, but more and more droplets of rain pierced through his body, killing him on the spot. Miserable cries rang out one after another. In just a short while, all the Earth Saint Masters had died. Their bodies were riddled with holes without exception, as blood dyed their bodies red. Right now, only 4 Heaven Saint Masters were still holding on bitterly. However, their advance had been forcefully stopped by the dense droplets of rain. Not only were they unable to advance at all, they were even rapidly retreating under the attack of the droplets of rain. "Hall Master Feng, what are you waiting for?" An assassin yelled out. A gleam of light flashed through the eyes of the girl in the distance. The small sword in Jianshin's hand immediately flew out of Jianshin's hand as if it had been controlled. It turned into a silver streak of light as it shot toward Jianshin's forehead. Jianshin's eyes narrowed. Suddenly, a faint azure light appeared in his eyes. The small sword under the control of the little girl immediately came to a halt before Jianshin's forehead. Afterward, it shot out under Jianshin's control as a bolt of lightning, targeting the girl. A faint azure sword chi appeared on the small sword. Sword of holy light. Jianqin split his attention and opened his hand, for dazzling radiant swords suddenly condensed in his hand before shooting toward the 4 Heaven Saint Master assassins as streaks of silver light. The 4 assassins spat out mouthfuls of blood as they flew backward. Their faces turned pale, and their bodies fell heavily to the ground. Hull Masterfong, who looked like a little girl, had her chest pierced through by the small sword. Her face instantly turned pale, and a trace of black blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. She had been poisoned. Whoosh! The sound of something tearing through the air rang out from behind. The small sword that had pierced through the girl's chest had returned under Jianqin's control. It passed through the girl's back with strands of sharp sword chi and returned to Jianqin's hand. The girl grunted and forcefully suppressed the poison that was rapidly spreading through her body. She immediately stomped her feet on the ground and soared into the air, fleeing into the distance. Jianqin did not plan on letting the girl go, although she only seemed to be 12 or 13. Jianqin knew that her true age was far greater than that. Sword of holy light. Jianqin called out, and a sword of holy light quickly condensed. With a wave of his hand, it shot through the air as a streak of light chasing after the girl. The girl suddenly turned around in the air as a short sword similar to the one used by the black-clothed people appeared in her hand. She swung it at the sword of holy light as hard as she could. With a boom, the sword of holy light was shattered, and the girl spat out a mouthful of blood. She fell from the air, and the poison in her body immediately erupted after losing the suppression of Saint Force, causing her face to rapidly darken. At this time, the wind and clouds surged in the sky as a huge pressure filled the world. The huge sword in Yangling's hand reached the horizon, emitting a dazzling red light. There was also a layer of terrifyingly high temperature being emitted from the huge sword, causing the surrounding air to rapidly rise. I'll let you have a taste of my heaven-tier battle skill. Yangling roared out as he suddenly swung the huge sword in his hand, slashing at the assassins closest to him. Although the assassins were Heaven Saint Masters, they had not reached the peak. They were far weaker than Yangling, who was a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master. They were directly immobilized by the pressure of the heaven-tier battle skill. The huge sword shone with a dazzling red light as it swept past the necks of 4 of the assassins, directly cutting off their heads. It then continued on toward the 5th assassin without slowing down at all. The assassin could no longer dodge. With a loud roar, he used all his strength to slash at the huge sword that had locked onto him. With a violent boom, the assassin's short sword was immediately repelled while the huge sword stabbed into his chest with lightning-like speed. The flames on the huge sword surged into the assassin's body as well. Arg! The assassin let out a painful scream. His entire body turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, a flame emerged from his body. The flame quickly expanded, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a sea of fire that drowned the assassin. Soon his body was burned to ashes. Yangling's heaven-tier battle skill had directly killed 5 experts of the same level as him, leaving only one of the 6 people who had surrounded him. Yangling, go capture that girl. Leave these people to me. Jianqin said loudly. Soon after, 5 more radiant swords condensed. Each of the 5 radiant swords was 4 meters long and gave off powerful pulses of energy. They were clearly even more powerful. These 5 radiant swords were the most powerful radiant swords that Jianqin could condense right now. They were much more powerful than the radiant swords he had just used. This was because these 5 radiant swords were something that Jianqin had comprehended after a dozen days of seclusion after returning from the pleasure boat. Yes, Master Yang Yutian. Yangling immediately replied and chased after the girl. Seeing the radiant swords that were clearly more powerful than Jianqin's, the expressions of the remaining assassins could not help but change. Retreat! One of them called out He no longer had any interest in fighting and fled into the distance with his heavily injured body. The 4 people behind him all fled in different directions. However, before they could get very far, the 4 radiant swords that hovered around Genshin immediately flew out. They chased after them at several times their speed and stabbed deeply into the backs of the 5 assassins. Afterwards, the radiant swords exploded loudly. The powerful energy directly shattered the bodies of the 5 assassins, turning them into blood that dyed the sky red. After the 5 assassins died, Yangling also flew over from afar. He was carrying the little girl in his hand. At this moment, the little girl's face was completely black. It was obvious that she had been deeply poisoned. Yangling threw the girl to the ground and said, "Master Yang Yutian, I've already captured her. Are you all right?" "I'm fine. These people can't harm me with their strength." Jianqin tidied up his messy clothes. Although the middle-aged woman had struck him with a palm strike before, it was unable to harm Jianqin's chaotic body at all. Moreover, the cold presence that had been sent into Jianqin's body had immediately dispersed under the chaotic force. Jianqin arrived before the girl and stared at her coldly. He asked, "Where did you get the materials for this sword?" The girl stared at Jianqin scornfully and said in an old voice, "Why are you asking so many questions when you're about to die? It's pointless because you don't have much time left to live. No one can survive the pursuit of our Yamahal, not even saint rulers." The girl's voice was very hoarse, which did not match her age at all. It was easier to believe that she was an old woman in her 70s or 80s from her voice. Jianqin's face sank. "If you tell me where you got the materials for this sword, I might spare your life." Jianqin cared very much about the material of the sword because it was one of the materials for forging the azulite swords. It was called Heaven Soulstone, and the amount of Heaven Soulstone he had right now was nowhere near enough because forging the swords required a lot of Heaven Soulstone. It basically took up a quarter of all the materials. "Don't even think about getting any information from me," the girl coldly said before directly closing her eyes. Jianqin glared at the girl for a while before sternly saying, "Yangling, restrict her movements. Take her back to the Union." Spurt. Suddenly, the girl vomited a mouthful of black blood before collapsing to the ground. She had completely lost all signs of life. Yangling quickly checked the girl's body and said, "Master Yang Yutian, she's already committed suicide by severing her own meridian." Jianqin remained silent. He glanced at the poisoned sword in his hand and silently stowed it away. He turned around and made his way to the carriage. "Let's continue on our way back to the Union." The coachman hurriedly leapt off the carriage and arrived beside Jianqin. He asked in concern, "Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, are you injured? It's no longer safe on the road. Get on the carriage. I'll take you back to the Union immediately." Jianqin remained silent and directly boarded the carriage. Right now, all he could think about was the small sword. The assassination attempt by the assassins did not affect him at all. He had killed countless times in his life, so he was used to small situations like this. However, just as Jianqin was halfway into the carriage, a dagger silently appeared in the coachman's hand. He stabbed it toward Jianqin's back with lightning-like speed. If the attack connected, the dagger would directly pierce through Jianqin's heart. A gleam of light flashed through Jianqin's eyes before he sneered disdainfully. The dagger viciously stabbed into Jianqin's back, but it only managed to pierce through his clothes. As soon as the tip of the dagger came into contact with Jianqin's body, it seemed to strike a tough piece of steel. It was unable to advance any further. The coachman's expression changed slightly, but he reacted extremely quickly. He poured Saint Force into the dagger as he used all his strength. However, no matter how hard he tried, the dagger was unable to advance any further. It was as if an extremely tough piece of steel was blocking the dagger's path. Bang! At this moment, Yangling arrived. Without saying anything else, he directly punched the coachman, sending him flying 10 meters away. He fell to the ground and constantly vomited blood. "Bastard, I never thought that your coachman would be an assassin as well." Yang Ling roared at the coachman. He was currently hopping mad. As Jianqin's personal guard, he had already made 2 mistakes in such a short amount of time. If it were any other Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, they probably would have died long ago. Jianqin crawled out of the carriage and stared at the coachman with a complicated gaze. He exclaimed, "What a brilliant concealment technique! Not only was your attack completely silent, there wasn't even the slightest bit of killing intent leaking out. I actually didn't sense it at all. You must have been trained. I wonder which organization you belong to. The Hell's Gate." The coachman emphasized every single word as he stared at Jianqin. "If it weren't for your defensive treasure, you would have already died at the hands of my underworld's gate." Jianqin sneered. He murmured, "The underworld's gate and the Yama Hall. 2 of the 3 great assassin organizations of the continent have actually come. The people who want to kill me really do think highly of me. I wonder if the people from the Blood Sword sect have joined in." With that, a radiant sword condensed in Jianqin's hand, and he directly shot it at the coachman. The coachman was only an Earth Saint Master. He had already been heavily injured by a single punch from Yang Ling, so he was unable to dodge Jianqin's attack at all. He died on the spot. "Yang Ling, you'll drive the carriage back to the Union. My days won't be peaceful for a while." Chapter 755. With the coachman dead, Yang Ling was obviously the one to drive the carriage. Yang Ling steered the carriage around the corpses of the assassins and quickly left, leaving behind only the blood and corpses on the ground as proof of what had just happened. In the distance, the onlookers all made way for the carriage. They all stared at the person in the carriage in admiration. Clearly, they had all witnessed how Jianqin had killed several Heaven Saint Masters with his abilities as a Radiant Saint Master. They were all convinced by Jianqin's strength. At this moment, the space in the distance suddenly pulsed. An invisible arrow completely condensed from world force seemed to have fused with the surrounding space, shooting toward the carriage with incomparable speed. Jianqin suddenly opened his eyes. A gleam of light flashed through his eyes. He was a Saint Ruler, so he could obviously sense the invisible world force clearly. "A Saint Ruler is secretly attacking me," Jianqin thought. His face, that did not change when he faced the encirclement of the assassins, finally became stern at this moment. He needed to consider how he could avoid this crisis without exposing himself. The arrow silently shot toward the carriage, but Jianqin's face was bitter. He was unable to react at all because a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master was unable to sense the world force that only Saint Rulers could control. At this critical juncture, the surrounding space rapidly solidified, causing the movement of the formless arrows towards the carriage to slow down, as though they had sunk into a quagmire. Their advancing speed was no longer as swift as before. Immediately afterward, a middle-aged man in gray seemed to have become one with the space. He shot over from the distance at an unbelievable speed and blocked the invisible arrow. With a grab of his hand, the invisible power of heaven and earth quickly condensed in the middle-aged man's hand, forming an invisible sword. With a wave of his hand, he rushed toward the arrow that was coming at him. The sword formed from the power of the world, and the arrow collided in midair. There was no rumbling sound as expected. The space there shook violently a few times. An invisible arrow was shattered. The invisible sword formed by the middle-aged man in gray did not slow down at all. It continued to fly into the distance, but the size of the sword had shrunk by half. A dozen kilometers away, a black-robed old man silently appeared in the air. He glanced at the gray-clothed, middle-aged man with a grave expression. Immediately, a longbow appeared in his hand. He quickly pulled the bowstring and shot an invisible energy arrow at the invisible sword. Without even looking at the result, he merged with the space around him and fled into the distance, disappearing in an instant. "Humph, you think you can leave just like that after offending my Radiant Saint Master Union? Stay." Killing intent flickered through the gray-robed, middle-aged man's eyes. He immediately pursued the old man. Just as the gray-robed, middle-aged man pursued the old man, another 3 arrows condensed from the world force shot toward the carriage from the north, south, and east. They moved as fast as lightning. The middle-aged man's face changed drastically. He came to a halt in his pursuit of the old man and turned around to stop the 3 arrows. As the middle-aged man flew, he reached out and a sword condensed from the world force condensed in his hand. He immediately shot it toward the first arrow, but at this moment he had already appeared in the path of the second arrow. He directly threw a punch with a dazzling white light, dispersing the second arrow. However, the third arrow had already approached the carriage. The gray-robed, middle-aged man did not have enough time to stop it. All he could do was watch as the third arrow shot toward the carriage with lightning-like speed. At this critical moment, a gleam of light flashed through Genshin's eyes. The chaotic force hidden in his chaotic Naiden surged out wildly, filling every inch of his body in a single instance. He completely unleashed the supreme defense of the chaotic body. Boom! The third arrow condensed from the energy of the world shot into the carriage, striking Genshin's chest with great precision. With a loud boom, the invisible energy directly shattered the luxurious carriage. The ripples of energy sent Yang Ling flying as he constantly vomited blood. Genshin was blown away like a cannonball. He directly smashed through the tough walls of several stores and landed several kilometers away. His expensive white robes had already been reduced to dust, revealing the faintly glowing golden armor. The armor was the defensive treasure created from the primordial god silk that Genshin had obtained. Genshin crawled up from the ground in a rather horrible shape. He stared at the armor woven from the primordial god silk in surprise as the light in his eyes shone brighter and brighter. This was because the power of the arrow had been completely blocked by the armor, while his chaotic body was completely useless. He had made all his preparations for nothing. "Are you fine?" A deep voice came from not far away. The gray-clothed middle-aged man had arrived in front of Genshin and was floating 3 meters in the air. He stared at the golden silk armor on Genshin's body with a strange expression. "I'm fine. Thank you for saving me, Senior." Genshin clasped his hands at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man stared at Genshin's armor for a while before looking into the distance. He said, "It's fine as long as you're fine. However, we can't let the assassins of the underworld sect leave so easily." The middle-aged man no longer paid any attention to Genshin. With a flash, he vanished, chasing after the assassins in the distance with great speed. Before long, a powerful ripple of energy erupted in the distance. The middle-aged man had already caught up to the assassins and began fighting. At the same time, a large group of people flew over from afar. The 2 old men at the front stood on white clouds. They wore white robes, making them seem like immortals. Behind them were 3 middle-aged men in tight robes. The 5 of them directly flew toward Genshin before landing beside Genshin in the end. The 2 old men at the front were the president and grand elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union. Yang Yutian greets the master and grand elder. Genshin immediately clasped his hands. However, he casually glanced at the 3 middle-aged men behind the president and grand elder. He could clearly sense that the 3 middle-aged men were saint rulers. The president, grand elder, and the 3 middle-aged men all stared at Genshin's armor in surprise. However, they soon shifted their gazes and looked at Genshin, who remained unperturbed. "Yang Yutian, are you fine?" The president asked gently. His voice was filled with concern. "Thank you for your concern, master. Yang Yutian is fine." His gaze quickly swept past the golden silk soft armor on his body. He could not help but secretly worry. He did not know if the president would ask him for the golden silk soft armor. What wondrous armor! It can actually block an attack from a saint ruler without being injured at all. Looks like blocking the attack from before hasn't reached the limits of the armor. I wonder just what its limits are. Yan Yutian, it looks like it'll be very difficult for regular Saint rulers to harm you with the protection of the armor. Old man can relax slightly with your comfort, the Grand Elder sighed. His gaze gradually sharpened as he said with a deep voice, "However, we can't let a single one of the 4 assassins go." At this moment, the battle in the distance became more and more intense. The 4 assassin Saint rulers who had ambushed Jianqin had all been intercepted. A few more figures flashed by, approaching the area with lightning speed. They arrived on the main street very soon. There were a total of 8 people. They varied in age, both young and old. The 8 of them glanced past Jianqin first when they arrived. Their eyes lit up slightly when they saw the armor on Jianqin. Afterward, the 8 of them clasped their hands at the president and said politely, "Greetings, President." In the next moment, the 8 people's gazes landed on the Great Elder. Their expressions froze, and one of them immediately said, "So it's the Great Elder." A few years ago, we heard that the Great Elder was poisoned and had been recuperating in the Central Union, causing us to worry endlessly for the Great Elder. Now, it seems that the Great Elder is fine. The Grand Elder glanced past the 8 of them indifferently. He did not mention the matter of him being injured. He smiled faintly. "Ancestors of the 8 great clans, I never thought you'd come as well. Grand Elder, the City of God has always been maintained by us 8 great clans. Now that something so major has happened, how can we not come?" An old man chuckled before looking at Jianqin. He smiled. "I heard that a genius has appeared in the Radiant Saint Master Union, reaching Class 6 at such a young age. I think that person must be you, little brother. You really are extraordinary. You managed to survive an attack from a Saint ruler with Class 6, Radiant Saint Water. You really have broadened the horizons of this old man." As he said that, the old man constantly studied Jianqin's armor. A strange light flickered through his eyes as a sliver of extremely well-hidden greed appeared in the depths of his eyes. Before Jianqin could reply, the Grand Elder said, "Since the City of God is maintained by you 8 great clans, shouldn't you deal with the 4 assassins?" "The Grand Elder is right. It should be handled by us 8 great clans," said a middle-aged man. With that, he directly flew off into the distance. Chapter 756. The President, Grand Elder, and the 3 middle-aged men behind them all shifted their gazes away from Jianqin. They stared in the direction of the battle. They're from the Underworld Sect and the Yamahal. I never thought that 2 of the 3 peak assassin organizations that have vanished from the continent for 1,000 years would come, the Grand Elder said with a heavy voice. His face was rather sunken. A gleam of light flickered through the president's eyes as he said, "Looks like the person who hired the Underworld Sect and the Yamahal must have paid quite the price to get them to send Saint rulers at the same time." However, the Underworld Sect and the Yamahal suffered a heavy blow from the Bloodsword Sect 1,000 years ago. They were heavily injured and were almost wiped out. 1,000 years isn't enough for them to recover much, so there's nothing to be afraid of. What I'm truly worried about is whether the Bloodsword Sect has interfered. If they do, the situation will become rather severe. The Grand Elder became rather stern when he heard the Bloodsword Sect. He said, "Of the 3 peak assassin organizations on the continent, the Yamahal and the Underworld Sect are skilled at hiding their presence, making it very difficult for people to detect them. They can then use surprise attacks to instantly kill their targets. The people from the Bloodsword Sect, on the other hand, use their unique baleful yin qi to deal with their enemies. This baleful yin qi is cultivated through slaughter and is extremely mysterious. It can fuse with space and pierce through everything. It can affect a person's mind when they catch them off guard, blurring their target's mind. In some aspects, the Bloodsword Sect and the Yamahal are more like the Yamahal. In some aspects, the Bloodsword Sect and the Yamahal are more like the Bloodsword Sect. However, the only difference between them is that they can't hide themselves at all. The special nature of the baleful Yin Chi makes it so that they'll be recognized with a single glance, no matter where they go. As a result, they always choose to kill openly when they carry out missions. They're not as skilled at hiding their presence as the Yamahal. However, the Blood Sword sect has vanished from the continent for 1,000 years, so they shouldn't appear again. Jianqin could not help but think of Uncle Xiao from Longevity Valley as he listened to the president and Grand Elder discuss the Blood Sword sect. He already knew that Uncle Xiao was the sect master of the Blood Sword sect, who had vanished for 1,000 years. His strength was unfathomable. At this moment, the battle in the distance gradually calmed down. Over a dozen figures rapidly approached from all directions, arriving on the street where Jianqin stood very soon. The middle-aged man who had saved Jianqin earlier threw the corpse in his hand to the ground and emotionlessly said, "I killed someone." The middle-aged man silently made his way to the president's side. However, he looked at Jianqin's golden armor, and a strange light appeared in his eyes. This was the first time he had seen a defensive treasure that could block an attack from a Saint Ruler without being damaged at all. Afterward, the remaining people all returned. Out of the 4 Saint Ruler assassins, only the middle-aged man had managed to kill one of them. The other 3 had all fled. The 8 ancestors of the 8 clans all looked at Jianqin as a strange light flickered in their eyes. One of them, an old man in fiery red robes, said to Jianqin, "You must be little brother Yang Yutian. Brother Yang Yutian is completely unscathed from an attack from a Saint Ruler, which really does surprise me. Looking at it now, it seems like it's all thanks to the golden armor on him. May I ask what the armor on little brother Yang Yutian is for it to possess such great defense? This is the first time this old man has seen something like this. I obtained it by coincidence. I do not know the exact details of the armor," Jianqin said indifferently. He did not reveal too much information. Just when the people of the 8 clans wanted to ask more questions, the president's voice rang out. "Yang Yutian, it's your fortune to have obtained such a treasure. You're lucky to have it with you today, or you would have been in danger. Although I called someone to secretly protect you, I never thought that the 2 assassin organizations would send 4 Saint Rulers to attack you at the same time. You almost died to their hands. All right, now that the matters here have been resolved, come back to the Union with me." The president did not pay any attention to the ancestors of the 8 clans. He directly returned to the Union with Jianqin and the heavily injured youngling. After they had left, the faces of the ancestors of the 8 clans all became rather sunken. I never thought that Yang Yutian would actually have a defensive treasure on him, allowing him to remain unscathed after taking an attack from a Saint Ruler. It'll be extremely difficult for the people from the Underworld sect and the Yama's Hall to kill him with such a treasure, a middle-aged man said with a heavy voice. One of the 4 Saint Rulers sent by the Underworld sect and the Yama's Hall is dead and 3 are injured. With their personalities, they definitely won't just let the matter go. Let's tell them that Yang Yutian possesses a defensive treasure and let them think of something, the old man in red said with a deep voice. The old man in the fiery red robe said in a flat tone, but there was a trace of greed hidden deep in his eyes. The golden silk armor can actually block an attack from a Saint Ruler when worn by a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. If I obtained such a treasure, wouldn't I become even more powerful? The old man thought. The sliver of greed in the depths of his eyes became heavier and heavier. The golden silk armor is just too tough. I've never heard of a treasure that can block attacks from Saint Rulers. I have to find a way to obtain it, Jianqin sighed. At this moment, the ancestors of the 8 clans all thought the same thing, but they did not show it on their faces. The golden silk armor had already tempted all of them. Jianqin returned to the Central Union very quickly under the guidance of the president. He directly flew to the top floor of the castle. Yang Yutian, the assassins of the Yamahal and the Underworld sect, are most skilled at hiding themselves. Since they've set their sights on you, they definitely won't let you go with how they do things. At the same time, our Central Union is basically a public place, so we don't have too many requirements for the people who enter. So it's very easy for the assassins of the Yamahal and the underworld sect to sneak in. Against them, regular guards are useless. As a result, your current residence is no longer safe. It's best if you move to the 5th floor. The 5th floor is where the senior members of our Radiant Saint Master rest and enter seclusion, without an elder's invitation. Even core members can't enter, the Grand Elder said to Jianchen. His voice was filled with concern. Yes, Grand Elder. Jianchen clasped his hands and returned. His face was filled with some respect. He did not really care about moving. He was confident that apart from Saint Rulers, the other assassins would not be able to threaten him at all. This was because not only did he possess the chaotic body that even Saint Rulers could not harm, making it impossible for Heaven Saint Masters to harm him, he also possessed the body of immunity to poison. Whether it was poison or assassination, it was useless against him. Yang Yutian, there just happens to be an empty room next to mine. You can live there. That way, if anything unexpected happens, I'll be able to arrive in time. Don't go out during this period of time. I'm sure the outside of the Central Union is filled with the spies of the Underworld sect and the Yamahal, said the president. Afterwards, Jianchen moved from the 3rd floor to the 5th floor of the castle. The president and Grand Elder did not mention a single word about the golden silk armor, allowing Jianchen to finally relax. In the blink of an eye, there were only 10 days left until the competition. During these days, Jianchen remained in his room and did not take a single step out of the Central Union. He lived a peaceful life. The white tiger remained in a deep slumber during these days and did not wake up. However, Jianchen could clearly feel that the energy within the white tiger's body was changing bit by bit. On this day, Jianchen's expression changed slightly as he sat cross-legged on his bed, comprehending a divine technique. His tightly shut eyes slowly opened, and with a flip of his hand, an ancient jade pendant appeared in his hand. Immediately, a weak consciousness was transmitted from the jade pendant to the space between Jianchen's eyebrows. Jianchen muttered to himself for a moment before accepting the jade pendant and walking out of his room. He walked a few meters and arrived at the president's room. As soon as he entered the room, he discovered a middle-aged man around 40 years old sitting on a chair with a respectful expression. Sitting across from the middle-aged man was the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union. Yang Yutian greets Master. Jianchen bowed to the president. The president gently put down the teacup in his hand and looked at Jianchen with a smile. He said, Yang Yutian, this is your senior. His name is Yun Tian. He's been in seclusion for over 10 years and only emerged yesterday. Why don't you greet your senior? Jianchen roughly studied Yun Tian before clasping his hands. Yang Yutian greets senior, Yun Tian. Yun Tian raised his head and glanced at Jianchen. He smiled warmly and said, Is this master's new disciple? You've reached the 6th class at such a young age. Not bad. You're much stronger than your senior in the past. Oh, right, Junior Yang Yutian. As soon as I emerged from seclusion yesterday, I heard that you had a defensive treasure that could block the attacks of Saint Rulers. I wonder if you can show me just what kind of treasure it is. Senior Yun Tian, I am truly sorry. This golden silk soft armor has never left my body, and it is extremely difficult to take it off. I can only ask Senior Yun Tian to take a look at it another day. Jianchen said with a smile, Since it's inconvenient, let's do it another day. Yun Tian smiled in an unconcerned manner. He paused slightly before continuing. Junior Yang Yutian is truly blessed to be able to obtain such a treasure. However, if I were to obtain such a treasure, I definitely wouldn't wear it and would instead offer it to Master. That's because only an expert like Master can bring out the greatest effects of such a treasure. On one hand, it can increase Master's strength, and on the other hand, it can repay Master for his many years of guidance. Junior Yang Yutian, don't you think so? Yun Tian smiled at Jianchen. Chapter 757. What a sly senior. He actually wants me to give my armor to the president. I wonder if this is Yun Tian's idea or the president's idea, Jianchen thought. Jianchen thought quickly, but he did not speak in a hurry. He knew just how precious the armor was. It was a soft armor created from the threads of an ancient god. It was a first-rate treasure that could only be found through luck. He could give the armor to his parents and a group of trustworthy friends without any hesitation, but he would never give it to the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union just like that. With an apologetic expression on his face, he said, "Senior brother Yun Tian, this golden silk soft armor that junior brother is wearing has saved my life. If it weren't for this golden silk soft armor, I'm afraid junior brother would have already died at the hands of those assassins from the underworld sect and Yen Luo Dian. If junior brother were to take off this golden silk soft armor, I'm afraid junior brother wouldn't dare to take a single step out of the Central Union in the future. With senior brother's experience, I'm sure you know just how profound the aura concealment techniques of the underworld sect and Yen Luo Dian are. When they kill, it's completely impossible to guard against." Yun Tian continued to smile and calmly said, "I've heard about the assassination attempt on you, but don't worry. The first time was purely an accident. I don't think Master would have thought that the two organizations would actually send several saint rulers to deal with you. However, something like this will never happen again in the future." With that, Yun Tian paused slightly before continuing. "Besides, quite a few people know that you possess such a treasure, so it's unavoidable for them to develop greedy thoughts. If a saint ruler moves against you, how will you be able to keep the treasure? It'll end up in the hands of others in the end, and it'll cause quite a lot of trouble for you. Why don't you give the armor to Master and let Master keep it for now? Once I'm powerful enough to keep it, I can return it to you. What do you think?" "Humph, Yang Yutian, once you give the armor to Master, I'll be able to borrow it from Master. With the armor, I won't even need to fear saint rulers. I must obtain the armor that can block attacks from saint rulers." Yun Tian sneered inside as a sliver of greed flashed through the depths of his eyes. Jianchen looked at the president and said calmly, "Master, is this what you want? If Master wants it, Yang Yutian can give it to Master for now. What's wrong with that?" Jianchen wanted to test whether this was Yun Tian's idea or if the president had ordered him to do this. He looked at Jianchen and said, "Yang Yutian, I don't have much time left. In a few more years, I'll turn into dust and be blown away by the wind. And with my strength, the number of people in the City of God who can harm me can be counted on one hand. As a result, your armor will only be a waste of its brilliance. Now that you've been targeted by the assassins from the underworld sect and the Yamahal, this armor can save your life. As for what your senior Yun Tian said, you don't need to worry about it at all. Master." Yun Tian panicked. Just when he wanted to say some words of consolation, the president raised his hand to stop him. "Yun Tian, there's no need to say anything more. Your junior brother's talent is unprecedented. He'll definitely be able to reach my level in the future. He might even be able to become a legendary Class 8 Radiant Saint Master. During this period of time, your junior brother's safety is of utmost importance. The armor is extremely suitable for your junior brother." Jianchen let out a sigh of relief inside. He glanced at Yun Tian and thought, "Looks like it's all senior Yun Tian's idea. He's already coveting my armor." Jianchen was filled with disdain. Only a saint ruler at the 6th heavenly layer or higher could steal something from him. Yun Tian was just a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, so Jianchen did not treat him with any importance at all. However, unless the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union had ill intentions towards him, saint rulers would never dare to barge into the Union in the City of God. The light in Yun Tian's eyes flickered. From what the president had said, he understood that his plan of using the president to obtain the armor had failed. Looks like Master values Yang Yutian very much, or he wouldn't have given up on a treasure like that. However, I won't give up on the armor, thought Yun Tian. At this moment, the president slowly became stern. He said, "Yang Yutian, Yun Tian, there are still a few days until the competition. I've called you here today mainly to let you understand the rules of the competition beforehand so that you can make preparations beforehand. The competition in a few days will be held in the Origin Energy Saint Artifact of our Union. The Origin Energy Saint Artifact contains a world, and it hides a huge space. All the participants will need to survive in there for half a month. During that time, your space rings will be sealed by the Origin Energy Saint Artifact's power, so you'll be unable to use them. You will need to find all the food and water you need during that time. The top 10 will be determined by your accomplishments in the artifact space. In there, you will use your own abilities to kill. You will obtain all the points of each person you kill, and the 10 people with the highest points will have the chance to reach Class 7. As a result, you will engage in an intense battle in the artifact space. Remember, do not show any mercy in there. Yun Tian's face did not change at all. He had already participated in the competition many times, so he obviously knew the rules extremely well. However, Jianqin was unable to remain as composed as Yun Tian. He asked, "Master, doesn't that mean that many Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters will die in every competition?" The president smiled mysteriously. Of course not. Although all the people who enter the artifact space will enter with their original bodies, the power of the origin artifact will take them away as soon as they come across any life-threatening danger. As a result, no matter how intense the battle is, they won't come across any life-threatening danger. I see. Jianqin came to a realization. He could not help but think of the competition in Mercenary City. Compared to the competition in Mercenary City, the competition in the Union was clearly more humane and safer. All right, I've said everything that needs to be said. The two of you can leave. Make the final preparations for the competition in a few days. Yang Yutian, don't go out during this time. The people from the other 2 clans of the Holy Emperor's Empire have all arrived, and they've arranged for people to stand guard outside the Union. They've probably come for you, so don't come in contact with them, just in case you get sucked into the conflict between the 3 clans. Yes, Master. After Yang Yutian and Yun Tian left, the president's face immediately became rather sunken. A cold light flickered through his eyes as he said, "The conflict between the 3 clans has already reached its climax. Once the matter of the Class 7 Radiant Saint Master is settled, the conflict between the 3 clans will erupt." Humph. The Tsar family, how can I let you succeed in uniting the Holy Emperor's empire? After leaving the president's residence, Jianqin directly returned to where he lived. Just as he entered, Yun Tian followed behind him. He looked at Jianqin with a smile and said, "Junior, I have some things to discuss with you." With that, Yun Tian did not wait for Jianqin's permission and directly entered Jianqin's room. Jianqin was calm. He did not care about Yun Tian's rudeness at all. He closed the door behind him and sat down on the bed. He said indifferently, "Senior Yun Tian, may I ask why you've come to find me?" Yun Tian sat down on a chair. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "Junior, I want to borrow your armor for a few days so that you can deal with the competition in a few days. Once the competition is over, I'll definitely return the armor to you because I have an extremely strong feeling that if I can make it into the top 10, I'll definitely be able to break through successfully and reach Class 7, Radiant Saint Master. If I really manage to break through, I definitely won't forget about your kindness in lending me the armor." Yun Tian stared at Jianqin closely. Jianqin smiled strangely. He stared at Yun Tian deeply and said, "Senior Yun Tian, to be honest, I also have an extremely strong feeling that once I make it into the top 10, I'll definitely be able to break through to Class 7. As a result, I need to make it into the top 10. The armor I'm wearing is my greatest reliance. That's simple. Once we enter the artifact space, we'll work together. With my strength ranked 8th on the rankings, I'll definitely be able to make it into the top 10 with you," Yun Tian smiled. "That's great. Let's walk together once we enter the artifact space. That way, there won't be any obstructions at all for us to make it into the top 10, Jianqin replied with a smile. Yun Tian laughed happily. You're right. We're very close to the start of the competition, so why don't I give the armor to you right now so you can familiarize yourself with it as soon as possible? Jianshan's smile became even wider as a teasing light appeared in his eyes. He said, Senior, you can just let me wear the armor. As long as you walk together with me, I can guarantee that you'll make it into the top 10. It doesn't matter if you wear the armor or not. The smile on Yun Tian's face suddenly froze. His expression became rather ugly as he said with a deep voice, Junior brother, are you really unwilling to lend me the armor? A treasure like that will only be able to unleash its full potential if I wear it. It will greatly increase our chances of getting into the top 10. Senior brother, I wonder if your goal is the treasure armor or a spot in the top 10. If it's only a spot in the top 10, then with my strength I can guarantee your safety. If it's a treasure armor, then you're destined to be disappointed. Jianshan's eyes were filled with ridicule. Chapter 758. Yun Tian's arrival did not affect Jianshan at all. Jianshan calmly stared at the wide-open door and murmured, Senior Yun Tian, I hope you don't cross my bottom line, or I definitely won't let you enter the top 10 in the artifact space. Jianshan was extremely confident about the competition this time. Not only had his control over the radiant arts increased by a lot, but he had also grasped 3 of them. Once he used the adjudicating sword, even Heaven Saint Masters would struggle to escape, let alone radiant Saint Masters who had weak constitutions. At this moment, on the 3rd floor of the Union, in a resting area for high-tier radiant Saint Masters, the white-robed Quan Yukai stood in front of his bed. He stared at the people entering and exiting the castle in a daze. There's still a few days before the competition begins. I've secretly contacted a few Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters to form an alliance. It's a pity that although they possess the strength of a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, their potential in the Radiant Arts is just too lacking. 4 or 5 of them added together can't even compare to me. Sigh. How can I enter the top 10 with this kind of strength? Quan Yukai murmured as he stared outside. Although the people of the 8 great clans have invited me to join them and move with them, my goal is to enter the top 10. If I really end up with the people of the 8 great clans, I definitely won't be able to enter the top 10 even if I obtain a spot. If I move alone, no matter how confident I am in my own strength, I'll still be forced to flee if I encounter a large group. It'll be very difficult to enter the top 10. If only I had Yang Yutian's strength. Yang Yutian used his radiant arts to kill over 30 Heaven Saint Masters on the boat without being injured at all. They didn't even have the chance to approach him. With such terrifying strength, he won't be in any danger even if he moves around alone. And recently, there's even news that Yang Yutian has an extremely tough armor on him that even saint rulers can't injure. This has made Yang Yutian even more powerful, making him even more ferocious. Looks like I can only easily enter the top 10 with Yang Yutian. It's a pity that I can't find where Yang Yutian is right now. I didn't leave a mark of Yang Yutian on the psychic jade either, so it'll be rather difficult to find him. Whatever. I'll see if I can find Yang Yutian when the competition officially begins. If I do, I'll have to stay by his side no matter what. Within a luxurious courtyard in the City of God, several hundred guards in jet-black armor stood straight, like statues. All of them radiated with powerful presences. They were actually all Earth Saint Masters. The jet-black armor they wore was forged from an extremely precious tungsten alloy. It was extremely tough, so each set of armor was extremely expensive to make. Quite a few Heaven Saint Masters were hidden in various places within the courtyard, making the defenses of the entire courtyard as tight as steel. These people were from one of the 3 great clans of the Holy Emperor's Empire, the Kara clan that controlled one of the 7 great capital cities. They had come to escort the esteemed Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters of the Kara clan to participate in the competition. In the Kara family's mansion, there was a very luxuriously decorated room. An old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion was standing in the middle of the hall. He was looking at a woman not far away, who was sitting in front of a dressing table and carefully combing her hair with a kind expression. The woman was wearing a pink dress, and the tight dress perfectly outlined her devilish figure. From the mirror, one could see the woman's devastatingly beautiful face. It was a face that could make countless men go crazy. Her beauty was full of nobility, full of holiness, and even carried an otherworldly aura, as if she was a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. She looked to be about 20 years old. Her pair of watery red phoenix eyes emitted a bright light. They were full of spirit, as if they could speak. There was also a layer of strange charm that pervaded the air. It was as if it could invisibly hook one's soul, causing one to be involuntarily infatuated with her gaze. Young Miss, a genius, has appeared in the Radiant Saint Master Union recently. His name is Yang Yutian. If you come across him, you must be careful because he's very powerful. If you come across him in the artifact space, you can't become his enemy unless you have no other choice. Otherwise, he'll probably become a powerful opponent for you, the old man said as he stood 10 meters away from the woman. The young miss was the beloved daughter of the previous patriarch of the Kara clan, Kara Libby. She was a very talented Radiant Saint Master, and she was very talented in the Radiant arts as well. She had already been a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master for several decades and ranked first on the Radiant Saint Master rankings. Although Kara Libby only seemed to be in her 20s, her actual age was far greater than that. A gleam of light flashed through Kara Libby's eyes. She said, "Elder Lu, may I ask who this Yang Yutian is? Is he really as powerful as you say he is? Why have I never heard of his existence before? He's even more powerful and terrifying than you imagine him to be. Young miss." A sliver of deep amazement appeared in Elder Lu's eyes as soon as he mentioned Yang Yutian. He said, "Yang Yutian is 24 this year, and he's already a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Aside from that, his potential in the Radiant arts has reached an unbelievable level. He's only been in the Tower of Radiance for 3 months, yet he's basically grasped all the Radiant arts and can use them with ease. They're much more powerful than the Radiant arts of regular Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters." A sliver of surprise flashed through Kara Libby's eyes when she heard that. She said, "He's become a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master at the age of 24 and has grasped all the Radiant arts. Yang Yutian's talent really is very great. It's far more than that." Elder Lu continued, "Aside from that, Yang Yutian has also grasped 3 great arts. It's said that a few days ago, Yang Yutian fought against over 30 Heaven Saint Masters on a boat on the Fragrance River by himself. He used the Radiant Shield to block the combined attacks of several Heaven Saint Masters, used the Sky Rain to force back several Heaven Saint Masters, killed a Heaven Saint Master with a Radiant Sword, and in the end, used one of the 3 great arts, the Sword of Adjudication, to kill several Heaven Saint Masters." Kara Libby gradually came to a stop as her face became rather stern. She said, "Elder Lu, according to what you've said, Yang Yutian really is very strong. At the very least, I'm far from being able to do what he did, fending off over 30 Heaven Saint Masters by himself and even killing several of them in the end." Elder Lu also became rather stern. He said, "What happened next was even more shocking. The remaining 20 or so Heaven Saint Masters were all killed by Yang Yutian's God's Descent. All of them vanished into thin air, leaving behind only ashes." "What? The God's Descent?" Kara Libby paled in fright. "This Yang Yutian actually used the God's Descent? Is he a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master?" Elder Lu shook his head. "No, he's not a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master, but a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. And recently, there's also a rumor that Yang Yutian has a defensive treasure on him that can block an attack from a Saint Ruler without being harmed at all. If that's the case, doesn't that mean that no one below Saint Ruler can harm Yang Yutian?" Kara Libby said with a heavy voice, her face extremely stern. Elder Lu nodded. "That's indeed the case. Young miss, If you come across Yang Yutian in the artifact space, you must be extremely careful. Remember not to become enemies with him. And according to the information I have, Yang Yutian has already fallen out with the Tsar family. This is a great opportunity for us to rope him in. A light flickered in Li Wei's eyes as she murmured, Yang Yutian. Just what kind of person is he? He's actually so outstanding. I really want to see this person. At this moment, a guard's voice rang out from outside. Young Miss, the disciple of the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union, Yun Tian, wishes to see you. With that, Cara Livy's eyes lit up slightly. She said, let him in. At the same time, in various parts of the City of God, a few large clans that had hurried over from the Holy Emperor's empire all warned the participating Radiant Saint Masters to not provoke Yang Yutian. They would rather give up on the competition than provoke him. This was because the current Yang Yutian was definitely not someone those second-rate clans could afford to offend. In the blink of an eye, the day of the competition arrived. Early in the morning, a large group of people had gathered in the huge square outside the Union. There were several thousand people, and all of them wore white robes without exception. They wore a blue insignia that represented a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master on their chest. Although the number of Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters here seemed to be as many as ants, this number was basically all of the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters on the Tianyuan continent. Even if there were some that had slipped through the net, there would not be many of them. Jianqin stood before the window in his room as he stared at the dense crowd below. He sighed emotionally inside. Any single one of these Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters was equivalent to a Heaven Saint Master. The gathering of several thousand Heaven Saint Masters was definitely a shocking sight. Jianqin lowered his head and glanced at the psychic jade in his hand. Other than making it convenient for Radiant Saint Masters to communicate, the psychic jade was also a key to enter the artifact space. At that moment, an intense light came from the sky. The sacred artifact placed at the top of the Union Tower emitted a blinding light, dyeing the entire world snow white. Even the blazing sun in the sky paled in comparison to the light emitted by the sacred artifact. Jianqin knew that the artifact space was about to open when he saw this. He hurriedly hugged the white tiger that was still sleeping on the bed. He wanted to stay in the artifact space for 15 days, so he was worried about leaving the white tiger alone. The artifact space has been opened. The competition is about to begin. All participants, channel your Radiant Saint force into the psychic jade. A dignified and familiar voice boomed in the sky. It was the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union. Jianqin hugged the white tiger tightly as he immediately channeled Radiant Saint force into the psychic jade with his other hand. Immediately, a white light descended from the sky, enveloping Jianqin and disappearing from the room. Then more and more eyes appeared in the sky, and the people in the square quickly disappeared. In less than 20 breaths of time, the thousands of participants in the square had all disappeared. Chapter 759. Jianqin stood on the bank of a wide river with the white tiger in his arms. In this peaceful world, only the sound of flowing water could be heard. Jianqin raised his head and looked around. His eyes were filled with curiosity as he murmured, "Is this the artifact space? It's actually no different from the real world. But the Radiant Saint Force here is several times denser than the City of God. There were mountains and rivers in the artifact space. It seemed like a completely real world. The only difference was that the sky was not azure. Instead, it was white. It seemed like a thick layer of clouds had obscured the sky. Jianqin constantly looked around. He expanded the senses of his soul, enveloping a radius of 10 kilometers. However, he did not discover a single person. It looks like the artifact space is very large. Several thousand participants have entered, yet I haven't discovered a single participant within a radius of 10 kilometers, Jianqin murmured to himself. He subconsciously checked the space ring on his finger, but to his surprise, The space ring had been sealed by a mysterious power. It could not be used at all. It really is, as the president has said. All the space rings in the artifact space have been sealed up by the power of the artifact. Not only can they not store items, but they can't be taken out either, Jianqin thought. Suddenly, the water behind Jianqin splashed up. A half-meter-long fish shot out of the water, charging toward Jianqin with great speed. It opened its mouth wide, revealing its sharp teeth that flickered with cold light. Jianqin did not even look back. He raised his right hand, and the radiant saint force in the surroundings rapidly condensed, forming a radiant sword in a single moment. He shot it toward the fish with a wave of his hand. The radiant sword directly shot into the fish's mouth and exploded with a boom. The surging energy wreaked havoc in the fish's mouth, blowing it to pieces. A gorgeous flower formed from blood bloomed in the air, bringing with it a thick stench of blood. Within it, a thumb-sized crystal stained with blood fell to the ground. Jianqin made his way over and grabbed a handful of grass to wrap around the crystal. He wiped away the blood on the surface of the crystal. It was a monster core. Jianqin stared at the monster core for a while before gently sighing. He murmured, "It's a pity that I can't open the space ring. I can't put the Class 4 monster core in there, so I can only throw it away." With a wave of his hand, Jianqin directly tossed the Class 4 monster core away. "I'll have to survive here for 15 days. During that time, I'll have to find my own way to find food and water. This would definitely be a problem if I were a regular Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, but my body as a fighter has always been tough. Going without food or water for 15 days won't affect me at all." As he said that, surging Radiant Saint Force surged over, quickly condensing into a meter-wide white cloud under Jianqin's feet. Jianqin set his foot on it, and the white cloud immediately took him off slowly, disappearing into the distance. In another region of the artifact space, there was a desolate mountain range. At this moment, a white-robed beauty stood proudly on the highest peak. Her rather small white robes and long hair fluttered in the wind. She was the young lady of the Kara clan, Karalivi. Two white-robed people stood silently behind Karalivi. They were an old man in his 70s and a middle-aged man in his 40s. The three of them stood there quietly as if they were statues. No one said a word. At this moment, a ball of white light flew over from afar. A handsome middle-aged man who stood on a white cloud flew over from afar. He directly arrived on the mountain where the three of them stood, and then he clasped his hands at Kara Liwei respectfully. "Greetings, young lady!" With that, the middle-aged man did not wait for Karalivi's reply. He arrived behind Karalivi and stood beside the other two. Afterwards, several more Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters of various ages flew over from all directions. Without any exception, they all clasped their hands at Karalivi before standing behind her quietly. Very soon, the group of three expanded to 8 people, forming a small group. These Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters were all members of the Kara clan. After entering the artifact space, they had gathered together through a special method. Karalivi glanced behind her and said indifferently, "Since everyone's here, let's set off. Remember, listen to my orders for everything this time. Do not act on your own. The competition this time is different from the past. There's one person who might pose a great threat to us." "Yes, young lady." The Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters all replied. Although Karaliwei was not as old as some of them, she was the strongest existence among Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, so they all felt deep admiration for her. At the same time, Karalivi possessed a very high status in the Kara clan. Not only was she the beloved daughter of the previous generation, but she was also doted on by an ancestor of the Kara clan. A cloud condensed from Radiant Saint Force gathered beneath everyone's feet. They all followed behind Karalivi and flew off into the distance. "Miss Li Wei, I've finally found you. Wait for me." Suddenly, a rather joyful voice rang out from afar. The second disciple of the president, Yun Tian, quickly flew over from afar on a similar cloud. He caught up to Kara Livy's group very quickly. Kara Liwei stopped and slightly creased her brows. There was a trace of impatience in her eyes when she looked at Yun Tian. She said, "Yun Tian, the name Liwei is not for you to use. You should call me by my full name." Yun Tian was startled. He couldn't help but feel a trace of anger in his heart. However, he didn't show it on his face. He smiled and said, "It was Yun Tian who was rude earlier. I hope Miss Kara Liwei doesn't take offense. Miss Kara Liwei, I wonder if you have considered my proposal a few days ago? Yun Tian, you want our Kara clan to help you deal with Yang Yutian. May I ask what benefits our Kara clan will receive?" Kara Livy gently brushed her hair and said emotionlessly, "Miss Kara Livy, you must know that Yang Yutian's existence will be a great obstacle to my ascension to the position of president, so I must stop him from becoming a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. I, Yun Tian, have already reached the peak of the 6th class long ago. I am very confident that I can break through to the 7th class this time. Once I become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master, I will become the president soon. After that, I will represent the Union and form an alliance with your Kara clan. What do you think, Miss Kara Livy?" Yun Tian stared at Kara Livy with shining eyes. Kara Livy's eyes lit up. Yun Tian's suggestion had indeed tempted her. The Radiant Saint Master Union was a powerful force that was no weaker than the 3 great clans of the City of God. They had always maintained a neutral stance and never participated in the disputes between the 3 great clans. If the Kara clan could form an alliance with the Union, the Kara clan's strength would skyrocket and they would become the greatest clan above the Tsar clan. However, Kara Livy was an extremely intelligent person. She did not agree to Yun Tian's request in a hot-headed manner. After a moment of thought, she said, "Yun Tian, according to what I know, your master still has over 100 years to live. As long as your master is around, the position of president will not fall to you no matter what. Moreover, it's not like you don't know the relationship between my Kara clan and the Tsar clan. After 100 years, the 3 great clans of the City of God will probably be unified by the Tsar clan. Miss Kara Livy, don't worry. Although my master still has 100 years to live, he won't be able to live for that long. The 3 great clans of the Holy Emperor's kingdom won't be unified by the Tsar clan because my master already knows of the Tsar clan's ambitions. If the kingdom of the Holy Emperor is really unified by the Tsar clan, then their strength will reach a terrifying level. At that time, the Radiant Saint Master Union will probably fall into the hands of the Tsar clan. Therefore, my master will definitely not let such a thing happen. Once things really develop to that stage, my master will use his life as the price to cast a forbidden technique against the Tsar clan's ancestor. After my master passes away, the position of president will fall to me. Although the Grand Elder will still be around, the Grand Elder doesn't care about the position of president at all. Moreover, with the relationship between the Grand Elder and my master, not only will the Grand Elder not compete with me for the position of president, he will even support me from behind. As for the vice president, he doesn't have much time left. Moreover, due to the limitations of his talent, he will never be able to reach the same height as my master. Therefore, the position of president won't fall to him. As a result, the only person who can pose a threat to me is Yang Yutian. Yun Tian's face was filled with confidence, as if everything was under his control. Only Yang Yutian was a variable. Yun Tian had been the disciple of the president for many years, so he knew a lot about the internal affairs of the Radiant Saint Masters. If one wanted to become the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union, there were 2 conditions that had to be fulfilled. The first condition was that one had to reach the strength of a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. The second condition was that one had to possess extraordinary talent. After all, the position of president of the Radiant Saint Master Union would definitely not fall into the hands of someone without a future. Yun Tian was confident that he could fulfill the first condition in this competition. As for the second condition, he had fulfilled it long ago. How Could his talent be ordinary if he could be accepted as a disciple of the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union? Kara Livy hesitated. After a moment of thought, she said, Yun Tian, I'll go with you to find Yang Yutian. Yun Tian beamed. Miss Kara Livy, please don't be impatient. Although I haven't experienced Yang Yutian's strength, I do know that he's extremely powerful. At the same time, he has an extremely tough armor on him, so he's very difficult to deal with. Although we're confident that we can deal with Yang Yutian if we work together, our own strength will be greatly reduced. We might even end up benefiting others. Please wait a few more days, Miss Kara Livy. I still need to find some helpers. After bidding farewell to Kara Liwei, Yun Tian left by himself. He told his white cloud to fly in the air, and that ancient jade pendant appeared in his hand again. Immediately, a weak strand of wool shot into the jade pendant from the space between his brows. It was currently using a special method to communicate with others. Chapter 760. Within the Saint Artifact space there was a forest. At this moment, there were over a dozen people in white robes sitting cross-legged under a large tree, resting with their eyes closed. Afterwards, more and more people rushed over from the surroundings. Not long after, the number of people had expanded to 20 people. They were of different ages, old and young. If Jianshen was here, he would definitely be able to recognize a few familiar faces. They were the people from the 8 great clans that Jianshen had met outside the Fragrance River. At this moment, a white-haired, sage-like old man slowly opened his eyes. He looked around and said, Since everyone is here, then this old man will represent the Grand Elder of the Tsar clan to announce something. In this competition, the top 10 spots will be secondary. Our main mission is to find Yang Yutian. We must stop him from getting into the top 10 at all costs. We must not give him any chance to break through to Class 7, Radiant Saint Master. If possible, we must remove the armor on him. Listen carefully. Since this is the Grand Elder's order, we will definitely do our best to complete this mission. An old man said clearly, this person was the Marquis of the Marquis estate of the 8 great clans. Even though the Marquis was the master of the Marquis estate, he was not the most powerful existence in the Marquis estate. He did not dare to disobey the Grand Elder's order at all. The white-haired, ruddy old man from the Tsar clan nodded in satisfaction. Just when he wanted to say something, his expression suddenly changed. He took out an ancient jade pendant from his bosom. Immediately, a mental wave was transmitted to his forehead. The old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. A smile gradually appeared on his face as he said, There will be a special guest coming to meet us here in a while. It looks like our chances of completing this mission are increasing. I think I have already guessed who this special guest is. It must be the second disciple of the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union, Yun Tian. This Yang Yutian has appeared out of nowhere. With his unprecedented talent, he has basically become the strongest person below Class 7, Radiant Saint Master. He has even grasped a forbidden technique. Other than being a great hindrance to the Tsar clan, his appearance also poses a serious threat to Yun Tian. He has basically replaced Yun Tian's position in the future. I think Yun Tian's determination to eliminate Yang Yutian is countless times stronger than the Tsar clan. An old man with a face covered in wrinkles said softly. The corner of his lips curled up into a cold smile. He was the Class 6, Radiant Saint Master of the Fire God clan. The ruddy old man from the Tsar clan did not say anything. Instead, he slowly closed his eyes and quietly waited for the arrival of the special guest. An hour later, a streak of white light finally appeared in the horizon. It rapidly approached them. Over 20 Radiant Saint Masters who were resting under the tree opened their eyes at the same time. They all looked at the figure that was flying over. It really is Yun Tian. The old man from the Fire God clan revealed a profound smile. Even many of the radiant Saint Masters in the surroundings revealed a strange smile. Sigh, the radiant Saint Master Union's days are numbered. The scholarly middle-aged man from the Chung family, Chung Jian, sighed inside and thought, the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union is about to reach the end of his lifespan, and the Tsar family has great ambitions for the Union. Yang Yutian might be the only person who can protect the Union. If he fails this time, the Union will no longer have the power to stop the Tsar family. Yun Tian slowly descended from the sky. He first bowed to everyone with a smile before looking at the ruddy old man from the Tsar clan. He said, Elder Zadalos, you must have guessed why Yun Tian has come. Are you willing to work with Yun Tian to deal with Yang Yutian? Zadalos basically agreed to Yun Tian's suggestion without any hesitation. He said, I'm more than happy to. This time, we all have a common enemy in the artifact space, which is Yang Yutian. In Zadalos' eyes, between Yang Yutian and Yun Tian, he hoped that Yun Tian would become the president of the Union. Although Yun Tian's talent was quite good, he would not be a threat to the Tsar clan in the short term. Moreover, Yun Tian would be easier for the Tsar clan to control. Yun Tian was not surprised that the Tsar clan agreed so readily. This was because he understood that they had a common enemy. Although the artifact space was protected by the power of the Saint Artifact and could not kill anyone, it was enough to make Yang Yutian lose the right to become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. This was because the next time the artifact space opened would be 50 years later. At that time, Yun Tian might have already become the president of the Union. Elder Zadalos, Yun Tian has already made sufficient preparations to deal with Yang Yutian this time. Miss Kara Livy of the Kara clan has also agreed to assist me. With the three of us working together, no matter how powerful Yang Yutian is, he will not be our opponent, Yun Tian said confidently. Yun Tian really is impressive. You've even managed to rope in that woman, Kara Livy. With that, Yang Yutian will not be able to escape. A gleam of joy flashed through Elder Zadalos' eyes. He felt like the Grand Elder's mission was becoming easier and easier. The artifact space has only just opened, so we have plenty of time. There's no rush to deal with Yang Yutian. Let's clear out some of the people here first, just in case something unexpected happens at a crucial moment. This artifact space, sure, is large. I think it's several times larger than the kingdom of Jessen. Jianchen flew high in the sky on a white cloud. He stared at the ground below and sighed emotionally. He had already flown 50 kilometers, but he had not seen a single person. Suddenly, a gleam of light flashed through Jianchen's eyes. He said, I've finally seen people, and there are 3 of them. Jianchen's white cloud immediately sped up. Very soon, a wisp of smoke appeared before Jianchen's eyes. He saw 3 white-robed Radiant Saint Masters roasting the meat of magical beasts they had just killed. Radiant Saint Masters were naturally not as tough as fighters, even Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. Once they lacked food and water, they would be as thirsty as ordinary people. As a result, the first thing the 3 Radiant Saint Masters did after entering the artifact space was not to kill other Radiant Saint Masters. Instead, they prepared food while they were still full of energy. Jianchen's arrival naturally attracted the attention of the 3 Radiant Saint Masters. They immediately stood up and stared at Jianchen cautiously. Jianchen descended from the sky and landed 100 meters away from the 3 Radiant Saint Masters. He then strode towards them and said, The 3 of you sure are in a good mood. You're actually roasting meat here. One of the 3 Radiant Saint Masters was a middle-aged man, while the other 2 were old men. The middle-aged man chuckled when he heard Jianchen's words. He said, If we don't have enough food, how are we supposed to survive here for 15 days? Sir, you seem to be alone, so why don't you join us and move with us? That way, your chances of making it to the top 10 will increase drastically. The middle-aged man's gaze towards Jianchen was still filled with caution. In his opinion, most people who dared to move around alone were extremely powerful. Their radiant arts had reached the third tier at the very least. Jianchen shook his head gently. "Thank you for your good intentions, sir, but I'm used to moving around alone, so I won't be going with you." With that, Jianchen paused slightly before continuing, "And my objective is to obtain battle merits. Do you want me to personally take action, or do you want me to give up?" The faces of the three radiant Saint Masters sank slightly. Their gazes suddenly became piercing, and without any hesitation, they immediately condensed meter-long radiant swords with radiant saint force. They pointed the swords at Jianchen. "Since you want to obtain battle merits from us, don't blame us for not showing any mercy," an old man growled. He immediately controlled his radiant sword to shoot at Jianchen. At the same time, the other two did not hesitate either. They controlled their radiant swords to shoot at Jianchen. Jianchen sneered disdainfully. He extended his hand and beckoned gently. Suddenly, the radiant saint force in the surroundings gathered toward him at an unbelievable speed, condensing into three radiant swords in a single moment. Every single radiant sword pulsed with energy. The expressions of the three radiant Saint Masters changed. As radiant Saint Masters as well, they could clearly sense that the three radiant swords were much more powerful than theirs. At the same time, the speed at which Jianchen gathered radiant saint force shocked the three of them. His radiant arts have reached the fourth tier at the very least. An old man cried out. His face became extremely ugly. The battle prowess of radiant Saint Masters had nothing to do with their class. It was completely determined by the level of their radiant arts, because radiant arts were their only means of attack. Only Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters, could use Class 5 radiant arts. It was not something Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters, could reach. As a result, Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters who could grasp Class 4 radiant arts could be regarded as a rare expert. This was because most Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters' radiant arts were still at the second or third tier. There were even an extremely small number of people with mediocre talent who were still stuck at the first tier. God damn it, why are we so unlucky? We've come across someone with Class 4 radiant arts on the first day we've come to the artifact space. Another old man angrily cursed. Boom! The 6 radiant swords collided and produced a great rumble. The radiant swords immediately shattered, dispersing into the air as balls of radiant saint force. Jianchen's radiant swords did not slow down at all, continuing to shoot toward the three of them. In the end, the radiant swords struck their chests under their unwilling and shocked gazes. At that critical moment, 3 huge pillars of light 2 meters in diameter descended from the sky, blocking the 3 radiant swords for the 3 of them. Afterward, they vanished with the 3 of them, leaving behind 3 thumb-sized white specks in the air. Jianchen knew that the 3 of them had been taken out by the power of the Saint Artifact. They had lost the right to participate. The power of the Saint Artifact would only appear when the target was truly in danger of dying. If the target was injured or heavily injured, it would not be enough to draw out the power of the Saint Artifact. As a result, once the power of the Saint Artifact appeared, it meant that the target was dead. Jianchen shook his head and gently sighed. Although they're Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters like Heaven Saint Masters, the 3 of them clearly haven't fought before. They have no sense of danger at all. With the fragile bodies of Radiant Saint Masters, the first thing they do when encountering an enemy is not to attack, but to protect themselves. Otherwise, let alone Heaven Saint Masters, even Earth Saint Masters can kill you in a single strike. Even an experienced Great Saint Master can deal a fatal blow to you. Chapter 761. After absorbing the 3 thumb-sized specks of light, Jianchen stowed the jade pendant away again. He murmured, "I've killed 3 people and gained 3 points. There are at least 4,000 to 5,000 Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters participating in the competition this time, so I need to kill 500 people and gain 500 points if I want to make it into the top 10. Next, I'll continue on the path of slaughter that I haven't experienced in a very long time. The only difference from the competition in Mercenary City is that the fighters will be Radiant Saint Masters instead of fighters. With a thought, Jianshin's surging Radiant Saint force rapidly condensed into a cloud beneath his feet. Just when he was about to step onto the cloud and leave, his eyes suddenly narrowed. This is the presence of a kindred spirit. I've actually sensed the presence of a kindred spirit. The sword spirit's voices suddenly rang out in Jianshin's head. It really is the presence of a kindred spirit. It can't be wrong. Master, where is this place? How can the presence of a kindred spirit exist? Ziying's voice rang out in Jianshin's head once again. Her voice was filled with disbelief. Oh my, there's actually an artifact spirit here. This is unbelievable. How can such a high-level artifact spirit appear in a world like this? The artifact spirit seems to have reached the immortal tier. Qing Sua's surprised voice rang out in Jianshin's head. Her voice was as pleasant as a lark's, making Jianshin's mind tremble slightly. I'm currently in the space of a saint artifact. Ziying, Qing Sua has the saint artifact given birth to a spirit like you? Jianshin was filled with surprise. I never thought that Master would actually arrive in the space of a treasure while we were sleeping and absorbing the energy of the five-colored immortal crystal. That's right, there is indeed a spirit here, and it's not weak either. At the very least, it's extremely powerful according to the standards of this world. However, the only flaw is that the artifact spirit can't be used as an offensive treasure due to the limitations of the original body. It seems more like a supportive treasure, Ziying said. I never thought that the saint artifact would actually give birth to an artifact spirit. How surprising! Jianshin sighed emotionally. At the same time, a violet and azure aura emerged from Jianshin's head. It condensed into a man and a woman above him. The man was handsome and the woman was beautiful. When the two of them stood together, they seemed like a match made in heaven. This was not the first time Jianshin had seen Ziying and Qing Sua's appearance. However, he could clearly sense that the illusory figures of Ziying and Qing Sua had become more solid than before. Clearly, they were constantly recovering with the help of the five-colored immortal crystal. Ziying and Qing Sua appeared above Jianshin's head. They stared into the distant sky. Then Ziying raised his right hand slightly. A surging violet light immediately seeped out from his body. It quickly condensed into a violet sword in his right hand. The violet sword was a meter long and 3 fingers wide. The hazy sword seemed to be covered in a layer of complicated inscriptions. They formed a strange pattern that covered the entire sword. It seemed to contain the truths of the world and the mysteries of the universe. It radiated with a mysterious presence. As soon as the violet sword condensed, it turned into a violet streak of light and shot off into the distance with unimaginable speed. It vanished in a single instant. It was so fast that it had completely surpassed lightning. Jianshin's eyes suddenly narrowed. He was secretly shocked. The speed at which the violet sword shot out had left him extremely shocked. It was a speed that no one could dodge. He struggled to imagine just who could dodge the attack of the violet sword. In a region isolated by tremendous energy in the center of the artifact space, there was a huge palace. At this moment, a handsome middle-aged man in white robes sat on the ground with his eyes closed. Suddenly, the middle-aged man's eyes snapped open. The moment he opened his eyes, the surrounding space distorted violently. Even the huge palace trembled slightly. This is the same presence as mine. Has an existence like me come here? The middle-aged man was shocked. He then vanished into thin air. In another region of the artifact space, Ziying looked in the direction where the violet sword had vanished from where Jianshin was. He said, "The artifact spirit is not weak, but its grade is nowhere close to ours. It can't sense Qing Sua and I at all. However, I've already notified it. It should be here soon." "Who are you?" Where did you come from? A heavy voice boomed out of nowhere as soon as Ziying finished speaking. With that, a white-robed, middle-aged man appeared in the air. He looked down at Jianshin's group of 3 like they were insignificant ants. He was the artifact, spirit of the Origin Saint artifact. He was the god that ruled over everything in the Origin Saint artifact. He could control all the energy in the Origin Saint artifact as he pleased, so he naturally had his pride. Ziying frowned slightly from the middle-aged man's pride. He immediately snorted coldly and said disdainfully, "How dare a mere immortal tier artifact spirit act so arrogantly before me? You're looking to die." A supreme sword chi radiated from Ziying. It swept through the air like an invisible storm, rampaging through the artifact space fearlessly. The middle-aged man's face changed drastically. His cold gaze was immediately replaced by deep fear. He rapidly retreated as his gaze toward Ziying became filled with extreme fear. The middle-aged man was the spirit of the Saint artifact. His every action could affect the changes in the artifact space. At that moment, the entire artifact space violently shook as if an earthquake was happening. Many mountains collapsed, startling all the participants. They had no idea what was happening. In the City of God, there was a huge white ball that was 10 meters wide at the top of the tower of the Radiant Saint Master Union. The white ball was completely condensed from the Radiant Saint force in the surroundings. It was extremely pure, and a powerful saint artifact that basically everyone in the City of God knew about was hidden in the center of the white ball. The saint artifact was known as the Origin Saint artifact by the people of the Radiant Saint Master Union. It had existed since ancient times and had silently accompanied the Union for countless years now. It had always maintained its current appearance, never changing at all. However, at this moment, the sphere of white light around the saint artifact suddenly shook violently. A strand of golden light could be vaguely seen leaping about inside, causing the Radiant Saint force in the surroundings to become extremely unstable. Even the headquarters of the Union was affected. The huge castle shook gently as a large amount of dust fell down. The shaking of the castle alarmed everyone inside. Immediately, a large number of white-robed Radiant Saint Masters ran out from the castle. They stared at the shaking saint artifact at the top of the castle in shock. No one knew what was happening. At this moment, over a dozen streaks of white light flew out from the castle. The president and the elders all hovered in the air on a white cloud as they stared at the shaking saint artifact in shock. Immediately after, several figures silently appeared beside the president. They all stared at the sacred artifact that was constantly swaying. Their expressions were also filled with doubt. None of them could explain the scene before them. They had no idea what was going on. What is happening? Why has the saint artifact, which has never changed, suddenly shook? An extremely old man spoke. His voice was hoarse and weak. If Jianshin were present, he would definitely recognize the old man as the person who had appeared in the Tower of Radiance and wiped the tables and chairs with a towel. Has something happened in the artifact space? The president of the Union growled. The light in his eyes flickered as he became uneasy. No one replied to the president because no one could explain what was happening. The saint artifact had existed for countless years, but nothing like this had ever happened. The shaking of the saint artifact did not last for very long. It slowly calmed down after a few seconds and returned to how it was before. However, the influence it had on the people of the Union could not be erased no matter what. The middle-aged man had already retreated to 500 meters away from the artifact space. He stared at Ziying in fear. It was not because of Ziying's strength. Instead, it was because he could sense a tremendous pressure from Ziying's soul. The pressure made him fearful and cowardly, where he could not even think about resisting. As a matter of fact, the middle-aged man even had the misconception that Ziying only needed a thought to make his soul disperse and his mind vanish, turning the Origin Saint artifact back into a saint artifact without an artifact spirit. It was as if the violet-robed young man was a ruler, and he was only a subject. If the ruler wanted the subject to die, the subject had no choice but to die. WW, who are you? Why are you so powerful? The middle-aged man was utterly terrified. He was no longer as arrogant as before. Ziying glared at the middle-aged man and called out, "You're just an immortal tier artifact spirit, yet you dare to disrespect me?" With that, an even greater pressure radiated from Ziying. This was a pressure that only targeted the artifact spirit. Only the artifact spirit could sense it. The middle-aged man's pale face became even paler. He staggered back a few steps, and his entire body trembled violently. This pressure had already penetrated deep into his soul, causing him to feel fear from the depths of his soul. He felt as if his spirit body was about to collapse. Chapter 762. Plop! Suddenly, the middle-aged man dropped to his knees and constantly kowtowed to Ziying as he begged, "Spare me, Exalted One. Please spare me. I was blind to have offended you, Exalted One. Please spare my life." At this moment, the middle-aged man understood that the purple-robed youth in front of him was once an incomparably powerful existence. This kind of power had completely exceeded his imagination. In front of him, he was not even qualified to carry his shoes. He was absolutely not someone he could offend. Ziying slowly withdrew her presence and coldly stared at the middle-aged man. She said, "Stand up. I'll forgive you for offending me this time, but don't do it again." "Thank you, Exalted One. Thank you, Exalted One." The middle-aged man slowly stood up as if he had been pardoned. However, he could not help but think about the unfamiliar scene that had suddenly appeared in his head. He knew that it was all real, and he knew even more clearly that the two swords that seemed to split apart the world belonged to the pair before him. As a result, the middle-aged man's fear and dread for the sword spirits had reached an extreme. Even though this was his own world, even though he was as powerful as a god in this world, the middle-aged man did not dare to think about resisting at all before the sword spirits. Even though he knew that the sword spirits had become much weaker and were not his opponent, he still did not dare to think about resisting at all. All that remained in his heart was extreme fear and dread. Ziying stared at the trembling, middle-aged man for a while before losing interest. She looked at Qing Suo with a gentle gaze and said, "Qing Suo, let's go back. Master, I'll leave the matters here to you." "All right." Qing Suo nodded slightly before shooting into Genshin's head, with Ziying as a streak of light. They had indeed been rather surprised when they discovered the artifact spirit earlier, but that was all. With their former status and strength, they did not take the artifact spirit of the Saint Artifact seriously at all. The middle-aged man finally relaxed when he heard Ziying's voice. However, before he could celebrate, Ziying called him master again. He trembled violently, and his gaze toward Genshin became filled with deep fear. This person must be extraordinary to be able to become the master of the two supreme swords. I can't offend him. Even if he's weak, I can't underestimate him. The middle-aged man warned himself inside. He had been frightened out of his wits by the scene that had appeared in his head. He placed anyone related to the sword spirits on his list of people he could not offend. The middle-aged man glanced at Genshin with some fear before carefully making his way up. He bowed deeply to Genshin and said extremely politely, "Greetings to the Venerable One." Genshin studied the artifact spirit in surprise. He found the way the artifact spirit had addressed him funny, but Genshin did not try to correct it. He asked, "How should I address you?" "Venerable One. I still don't have a name, but they all call me Master Artifact Spirit," said the middle-aged man. "They." A gleam of light flashed through Genshin's eyes. "Who are you referring to by they?" "Venerable One, they're the presidents of the Radiant Saint Master Union," said the middle-aged man. Genshin sank into his thoughts and did not dwell on the topic. He looked at the middle-aged man in interest and said, "I've come this time to obtain origin energy so that I can become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. Since you're the artifact spirit, you must be able to control origin energy as well." The middle-aged man became slightly troubled when he heard that. He said, "Venerable One, you may not know this, but all the origin energy in the artifact space has been sealed by a powerful barrier. I may be the artifact spirit, so I can control everything in this space, but I can't control the barrier that seals the origin energy. This is because the barrier has existed for who knows how long before I gained sentience. It's extremely tough as well. Even if I use all the energy in the artifact space, I can't break through it." Jianqin frowned slightly when he heard that, perhaps because he could tell that Jianqin was unhappy. The middle-aged man added in a hurry, "Venerable One, although the barrier is so small that it can't be broken, it opens once every 50 years. There's still a year before it opens again. Once it opens again, Venerable One will be able to absorb the origin energy." Jianqin sighed inside when he heard that. It seemed like he needed to follow the rules of the Union step by step if he wanted to become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. Jianqin bid farewell to the middle-aged man and left on a white cloud. He flew off into the distance and continued to search for other participants so that he could obtain more achievements from them. 50 kilometers away from Jianqin, 5 white-robed Radiant Saint Masters flew toward Jianqin on a cloud. 2 of them were middle-aged men and 3 were old men. They all came from a few large clans in a king-level city within the Holy Emperor's empire. If the 5 of us work together this time, we'll probably be able to put up a fight even if we come across someone on the 10 great experts rankings. Even if we can't beat them, running away won't be a problem. As soon as we come across a single person or a group with fewer people, we'll immediately take action and steal their achievements. We'll do our best to get one of us into the top 10. The one who spoke was an old man. He was very confident in his group's strength because all 5 of them had reached the 3rd tier of the Radiant Theurgy. Once they worked together, they would have nothing to fear even if they came across an expert of the 4th tier. I hope so, but this artifact space is just too big. The 5 of us have already traveled over 20 kilometers, but we haven't come across a single person. A middle-aged man complained with some dissatisfaction. Everyone look. Isn't there a person up ahead? Suddenly, another middle-aged man revealed a look of surprise and cried out as he pointed up ahead. Hearing this, everyone looked up and saw that in front of them, there was a ball of white light rapidly approaching them. With that, the 5 Radiant Saint Force cultivators immediately rejoiced. One of the old men said in a hurry, "There's only one person, so we can't let this fish go. Everyone, go and surround him, first to prevent him from escaping." Without any hesitation, the 5 of them immediately accelerated toward the Radiant Saint Master who was flying towards them. The person on the other side had clearly discovered them as well, but he did not change his speed at all. He continued to fly over steadily along his original path. Very soon, the group of 5 surrounded the Radiant Saint Master who had come alone. At the same time, a layer of radiant armor condensed from Radiant Saint Force enveloped them tightly, leaving only their eyes exposed. Jianqin stared the 5 people around him calmly. He sneered and said, "What's the meaning of this?" "The meaning of this? Ha! What do you think the meaning of this is? Kid, I can't be bothered to waste my breath on you. I'd advise you to give up and leave obediently so that you don't have to suffer." An old man laughed aloud as he stared at Jianqin coldly. "Exalted One, do you want me to viciously punish these people for offending you?" The artifact spirit's voice rang out in Jianqin's head. It was rather angry. The 5 Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters who surrounded Jianqin had never thought that not only had they offended someone they could not afford to offend, but they had even angered the artifact spirit. Jianqin gently shook his head. He seemed to murmur to himself, "There's no need. I don't need you to interfere with my matters. You just need to do what you need to do. If they face life-threatening danger later, just take them away." "Yes, Exalted One," the artifact spirit replied politely. It obeyed Jianqin completely, as if Jianqin was its master. Kid, what are you mumbling about? Have you thought it through? If you don't make up your mind in 3 seconds, don't blame us for not going easy on you, a middle-aged man said impatiently. If it were not for the fact that they wanted to conserve as much energy as possible, the 5 of them would have taken action long ago. Jianqin stared at the people around him and sneered. You want me, Yang Yutian, to give up? You're dreaming. Jianqin reached out with his hands and condensed 5 radiant swords in an extremely short amount of time. They pulsed with powerful energy. What, you're Yang Yutian? The 5 people's expressions changed drastically. They stared at Jianqin in disbelief as well as endless shock. Yang Yutian's name was like thunder to them. In the entire city of God, all the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters were familiar with the name Yang Yutian because he was a miraculous figure. Not only had he become a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master at 24 years of age, but his control over the radiant arts had also reached an extremely high level. He had once slain over 30 Heaven Saint Masters on the Fragrance River outside the City of God, leaving all the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters speechless. Jianqin did not give them the chance to beg for mercy. A sharp light flashed through his eyes, and with a thought, the 5 radiant swords immediately shot toward the 5 of them as streaks of white light. The 5 of them were quite frightened by Jianqin's name. They became slightly stunned and were struck in the chest heavily by the radiant swords. Spurt! The 5 of them all vomited blood as they were blown away by the huge force. Their faces had become pale while the radiant armor on them became covered with web-like cracks. In the end, with a bang, the radiant armor on them shattered from Jianqin's attack. Chapter 763. The 5 Radiant Saint Masters were blown away as they vomited blood from Jianqin's strike. The clouds that supported their flight vanished as well, causing them to fall heavily onto the ground with a 50-meter-long parabola. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters were not as tough as fighters. Even though they did not die from the fall, they felt like all their bones had been broken. They even lost the strength to speak from the excruciating pain. Their pale white faces had become purplish from the fall. They were in excruciating pain. They had never experienced such intense pain in their lives. Jianqin coldly stared at the 5 Radiant Saint Masters on the ground. He felt no pity for them at all. With a thought, another 5 radiant swords condensed in his hand. With a wave of his hand, the 5 radiant swords shot toward the chests of the 5 Radiant Saint Masters as silver-white streaks of light. This time, the 5 Radiant Saint Masters no longer had the power to resist. They could only watch helplessly as the 5 radiant swords shot towards their chests. At that moment, they had never felt so close to death before. Even though they knew that they could not die in the artifact space, they still felt a sliver of fear towards death when they personally faced it. The radiant swords pierced through the chests of the 5 Radiant Saint Masters mercilessly. However, before the sharp tips of the radiant swords could pierce through their bodies, 5 huge pillars of light descended from the sky. They enveloped the 5 of them and vanished. The radiant swords under Jianqin's control dispersed the moment the 3 pillars of light appeared. They had been directly crushed by the power of the pillars of light. In the blink of an eye, the 5 Radiant Saint Masters who were about to die had vanished, leaving behind 5 finger-sized specks of white light in the air. This artifact, Spirit Sure, is powerful. It can actually save someone at such a critical juncture. The timing is perfect. I wonder just how powerful this artifact spirit is in the Saint Artifact space, Jianqin murmured. Jianqin thought to himself as he stared in the direction that the 5 of them had vanished. His opinion of the artifact spirit increased once again. Afterward, Jianqin arrived in front of the 5 specks of light floating in the air. He took out an ancient jade pendant from his bosom and absorbed all of the specks of light. These specks of light were the so-called battle records. They were similar to the battle records that Jianqin obtained by killing people in the mercenary tournament. The only difference was that one was a physical object, while the other was a virtual object. This was because the battle records were completely generated by saint artifacts. Everyone only had one battle record at the beginning, and then they had to kill other participants to increase their battle records. The ancient jade pendant was the item that recorded the battle records. In the blink of an eye, half a day passed. During that time, Jianqin had already crossed several hundred kilometers at a steady pace on a cloud. He discovered signs of battle in many places along the way. There was quite a lot of blood everywhere. Clearly, quite a few Radiant Saint Masters had encountered each other in these places, resulting in conflicts. During that time, Jianqin also came across a few groups of Radiant Saint Masters. There were 7 at most, and there were even 2 Radiant Saint Masters who were alone like him. The appearance of these people directly increased Jianqin's battle achievements from 8 to over 40. Jianqian flew through the air on a cloud condensed from Radiant Saint Force. He had already expanded the senses of his soul as far as he could, enveloping a range of 20 kilometers in search of the participants. At this moment, Jianqin came to a slight halt. He stared ahead with a pair of sharp eyes as he frowned slightly. 30 kilometers ahead of him, a black cloud rapidly drifted through the air. A few Radiant Saint Masters on white clouds fled for their lives with undisguised fear. The black cloud behind them was not a true black cloud. Instead, it was composed of pitch-black flying magical beasts. There were thousands of them. Class 4 magical beasts, black crows. There are just too many of them. Jianqin stared at the black cloud composed of countless flying magical beasts as a sliver of surprise appeared on his face. He had killed quite a few Class 4 magical beasts in his life, but this was the first time Jianqin had seen thousands of them appear at the same time. At this moment, the Radiant Saint Masters, chased by the black crows, discovered Jianqin as well. They immediately changed their direction, flying straight towards Jianqin. They wanted to drag Jianqin down with them. Jianqin sneered at the sight of this. Instead of retreating, he advanced. He stood on a white cloud as he flew towards the black crows at a steady pace. The Radiant Saint Masters, chased by the black crows, all rejoiced when they saw Jianqin's actions. That person clearly doesn't know the power of the black crows. Not only is he not running, but he's even flying over. Is he looking to die? Does that idiot think that the black crows are just Class 1 magical beasts and that they're easy to kill? Even if they are Class 1 magical beasts, they won't be easy to kill if there are thousands or even tens of thousands of them. Not to mention that they're all Class 4 magical beasts with a few Class 5 magical beasts among them. Even the strongest Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, Caroline, would probably die if she encountered so many black crows. Is that person so confident that he thinks he's stronger than Caroline, who ranks first among the 10 great groups of experts? No matter what, since that person is recklessly flying over, let's get him to keep the black crows busy so that we have time to escape. That's right. Let's hope that person isn't too weak and can keep the black crows busy so that we have more time to find other Radiant Saint Masters. Once we have enough people, we might be able to hold off the black crows for a while. The Radiant Saint Masters, chased by the black crows, all sneered. At the same time, they were secretly accumulating power. They were prepared to use their full speed to pull away from the black crows as soon as the person in front attracted the attention of the black crows behind them. They firmly believed that the person in front of them would not be able to keep the black crows busy for long. Before long, the Radiant Saint Masters, chased by the black crows, approached Jianqin. In order to encourage Jianqin, someone immediately called out to Jianqin from afar, "Sir, please lend us a hand. We'll work together to kill these black crows." As they spoke, powerful Saint Force had already condensed before them. From the looks of it, they really did seem to want to fight to the death with the black crows behind them. Jianqin did not even glance at the Radiant Saint Masters. Instead, he stared at the black crows behind them. The Radiant Saint Masters in the surroundings had already begun to gather around Jianqin. The Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters all sneered inside when they saw how Jianchen actually wanted to fight against the Black Crows. When they brushed past Jianchen, the Radiant Saint Force that had condensed before them immediately gathered beneath their feet, causing their speed to suddenly increase. They flew past Jianchen with lightning speed and fled into the distance. Jianchen slowly closed his eyes and began to gather Radiant Saint Force with all his might. It was as if he did not see the Radiant Saint Masters fly past him with a gust of wind. Suddenly, the calm Radiant Saint Force in the surroundings suddenly became violent. Visible streaks of white light shot over from all directions, gathering around Jianchen. At that moment, all the Radiant Saint Force in a radius of 10 kilometers began to boil. It seemed to have turned into a storm, causing a gale to sweep through the surroundings. Although the Black Crows were not powerful, only Class 4, there were just far too many of them. Jianchen needed to deal with them carefully. The Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters all became surprised when they sensed the violent Radiant Saint Force in the surroundings. Shock filled their faces, and they could not help but come to a halt. They hovered a few kilometers away as they stared at Jianchen in shock. He can actually gather all the Radiant Saint Force in a radius of 10 kilometers, all by himself. How is this possible? The rate at which Radiant Saint Force gathers is just far too fast. This is definitely not something that Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters can achieve. Is he a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master? Who is this person? He's actually so powerful. Probably even Kara Livy, who ranks first among the 10 great expert groups, isn't as powerful as him. Even Kara Livy, who ranks first among the 10 great expert groups, can't gather Radiant Saint Force at such a speed. The Radiant Saint Masters all cried out as they hovered in the distance. At that moment, their gazes towards Jianchen had completely changed. Now, the Black Crows were less than 300 meters away from Jianchen. They rapidly swarmed towards Jianchen. At the same time, an extremely powerful ball of Radiant Saint Force gathered around Jianchen. The dazzling white light was like the sun, causing the surroundings to dim before it. Boundless rain. A cold voice rang out from the ball of Radiant Saint Force. The ball of Radiant Saint Force immediately began to condense, turning into bean-sized droplets that hovered around Jianchen. Every single droplet pulsed with powerful energy. They were filled with a sharp presence. Just when the Black Crow beast was 50 meters away from Jianchen, who was surrounded by raindrops, pointed his finger. The countless raindrops seemed to have turned into sharp arrows, leaving behind tiny white streaks in the air as they flew towards the Black Crow beast like lightning. The bean-sized droplets collided with the Black Crows and directly passed through them. They did not slow down at all as they continued to shoot toward even more Black Crows behind them. Every single droplet pulsed with powerful energy, enough to threaten Heaven Saint Masters and heavily injure Earth Saint Masters. Even though the Black Crows possessed the bodies of magical beasts, they were only Class 4 after all. Their feathers, which were extremely tough in the eyes of regular fighters, were unable to stop the tiny droplets at all. They were as fragile as tofu. Chapter 764. Thousands of Black Crows had already surrounded Jianchen. From afar, it seemed like a huge black ball hovering in the air, completely swallowing Jianchen. It was impossible to see what was going on inside from the outside. The Heaven Saint Masters, who stood a few kilometers away, stared closely at the scene before them. Their faces were rather mixed. They had never thought that a random participant they had come across would be so powerful, able to fend off thousands of Class 4 magical beasts all by himself. No one would believe them if they told them about this. Who is that person? He's actually so powerful. He must be quite famous. Is he Jackie, who ranks second on the rankings? Probably only Jackie has such strength among Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. Impossible. I have personally witnessed Jackie's strength. He's very powerful, but it's impossible for him to be as powerful as a bandit. Jackie can't gather Radiant Saint Force at such a fast rate either. Who cares who he is? No matter how powerful he is, he's only a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. It's impossible for him to survive the encirclement of so many black crows. That's right. A Class 6 Radiant Saint Master can't deal with so many Class 4 black crows. Not to mention that there are a few Class 5 magical beasts hidden among them. Unless he's a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master, the best outcome would be for him to flee like us. That's not necessarily true. Didn't you see the blood rain and the black crow beasts that fell from the sky? How long has it been? Hundreds of black crow beasts have already died. Moreover, all the black crow beasts' bodies are riddled with holes. Many of them have even turned into powder and fell to the ground. If the time is a little longer, perhaps this person can really kill all the black crow beasts by himself. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. The Radiant Saint Masters fell silent as they stared ahead. However, when they saw the black crow beasts fall from the sky like rain, shock silently filled their hearts. They were confident that it was impossible for them to kill so many black crow beasts so quickly when they were surrounded by so many of them. The Radiant Saint Force in the surroundings constantly gathered toward Jianshin. Under Jianshin's control, it constantly condensed into bean-sized droplets that fell in all directions. At the same time, Jianshin used the Radiant Arte over and over again without stopping. At this moment, Jianshin was surrounded by thousands of black crows, but he remained composed. The area 30 meters around him was completely empty. The black crows were unable to charge in at all because, once they did, they would be riddled with holes by the black crows. They would directly die without an intact corpse. At that moment, Jianshin seemed to have become a killing machine as he hovered in the air. Several or even more black crows would die every second. The ground below had already been dyed red. The dense corpses of the black crows had even formed a thick carpet on the ground. The air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. The death of their comrade did not make the black crow beasts retreat. Instead, the smell of blood in the air made the black crow beasts even more frenzied and violent. They were all fearless as they charged toward Jianshin like moths to a flame. The black crows decreased at a visible rate. At this moment, over a dozen larger Class 5 black crows suddenly let out a sharp cry. They charged at Jianshin with a tremendous presence. Their bodies were like tough metal. When the black crows landed on their bodies, they actually produced clanging sounds. They were actually able to block the attacks. Even so, the black crows were still able to resist the attacks of the black crows. When their bodies were about 10 meters away from Jianshin, they could no longer move forward. A cold light flashed in Jianshin's eyes. The power of the black crows suddenly increased by more than 2 times. This time, the Class 5 black crows were no longer able to block the attacks of the black crows as easily as before. Every raindrop that was the size of a soybean would cause their bodies to blossom with beautiful flowers of blood. Although the raindrops could not penetrate their bodies, they were still able to inflict heavy injuries. It didn't take long for these rank 5 black crow beasts to meet the same fate as their companions. Their bodies were dismembered, and they fell from the sky with countless holes. Caw! Suddenly, an ear-piercing cry rang out from the group of black crows. The sound was sharp and had the power to pierce through gold and shatter stone. It was so loud that it made one's eardrums hurt. As the sound rang out, the black crows surrounding Jianshin seemed to have received an order. They all gave up attacking Jianshin and scattered far away. Jianshin's body, which had been hidden by the black crows, finally reappeared. The surrounding black crows all retreated 3 kilometers away and stared at Jianshin covetously. As they retreated, a black crow beast king that was 10 meters long and as black as ink appeared before Jianshin's eyes. Its red eyes were filled with bloodthirst and brutality as it stared at Jianshin fiercely. The strength of a Class 6 magical beast. Jianshin stared coldly at the Black Crow Beast King. He had long discovered the existence of this Black Crow Beast King. However, a Class 6 magical beast was not worthy of his attention. Caw! Suddenly, a tremendous pressure radiated from the Black Crow Beast King. It immediately turned into a black streak of light as it charged toward Genshin. The toughness of a Class 6 magical beast's body was extremely great, far greater than that of a Heaven Saint Master. If he continued to use the Heavenly Rain, it would only be like scratching an itch for the Black Crow Beast King. It would not pose any threat to him at all. Genshin opened his hand and a radiant sword immediately formed. It shot toward the Black Crow Beast King as a white streak of light. Boom! The sword of holy light clashed with the Black Raven Beast King, producing a loud boom. The powerful recoil and energy shockwaves not only stopped the Black Raven Beast King from charging forward, but also pushed it back. Blood began to appear on its head. Genshin's eyes narrowed as he murmured to himself, "The Black Crow Beast King's body really is tough. My attack that can heavily injure a Heaven Saint Master has only scratched its skin. Looks like normal attacks can't harm it anymore." The Black Crow Beast King seemed to be infuriated. It roared at the sky and opened its mouth. A huge ball of energy shot toward Genshin with lightning speed. Genshin remained calm as he chanted, "Radiant Shield!" The radiant saint force in the surroundings condensed at an unbelievable speed, forming a 2-meter wide shield that blocked the ball of energy. At the same time, Genshin pointed a finger at the sky. A gleam of light flashed through his eyes as he yelled, "Sword of Adjudication!" At that moment, all the radiant saint force in a radius of 10 kilometers seemed to be sucked in by a great force. It rapidly gathered toward Genshin, condensing into a 10-meter-long sword above Genshin's finger in the end. It shone with a dazzling white light and pulsed with an extremely terrifying energy. Before it, even a Heaven-tier battle skill from a Heaven Saint Master paled in comparison. The Sword of Adjudication. It's actually one of the 3 great divine techniques, the Sword of Adjudication. Only Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters can use it. He really is a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. He's Yang Yutian. It's said that Yang Yutian can control the 3 divine trees as a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. There's also a rumor that Yang Yutian used the forbidden technique, God's Descent, on the most luxurious boat on the Fragrance River, killing several dozen Heaven Saint Masters in a single strike. The appearance of the Sword of Adjudication made the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters in the distance pale in fright. Caw! The Black Crow Beast King produced a strange cry. Its scarlet eyes were filled with fear as it stared at the 10-meter-long sword above Genshin's head. It could sense the destructive power within the sword, which made it feel a sliver of fear. Afterward, the Black Crow Beast King rapidly retreated. It constantly flapped its wings, shooting huge wind blades at Genshin in an attempt to keep Genshin busy so that it could escape. A gleam of light flashed through Genshin's eyes when he saw the wind blades shoot over. He swung the Sword of Adjudication loudly, cutting through all the wind blades that were about to reach him. Afterward, the Sword of Adjudication turned into a silver-white streak of light, pursuing the Black Crow Beast King with unbelievable speed. The Sword of Adjudication directly passed through the Black Crow Beast King's body, severing all of its life force. In the end, it vanished into the horizon. No one knew where it had gone. Caw! Before it died, the Black Crow Beast King produced a sorrowful cry filled with unwillingness. The sound reverberated through the sky, spreading far and wide. Afterward, its huge body fell heavily to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. Caw! Suddenly, a shocking roar rang out from afar. It was filled with grief and fury. It passed through the obstruction of countless mountains and rivers, reverberating through the sky. With the voice, an extremely vast presence appeared from afar. The Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters a few kilometers away immediately paled. They felt like the voice was like a heavy hammer that slammed into their chests, causing them to vomit blood. Their faces immediately paled. Chapter 765. For once, Jianqin became stern. He could tell that it was an extremely powerful Class 7 magical beast from the roar. It was at the 5th heavenly layer of Saint Ruler, at the very least. Why is there such a powerful magical beast here? Jianqin was secretly surprised. The magical beast that had roared out was clearly a member of the same clan, or a senior of the Black Crow Beast King he had killed. He knew that he had angered the powerful Class 7 magical beast far away by killing the Class 6 Black Crow Beast King. The Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters in the distance all became sheet white. They became extremely frightened. The earth-shaking roar from before had already frightened them out of their wits. They were now filled with endless fear, causing their bodies to gently tremble and their legs to tremble. TTT. It must be a Class 7 magical beast. Let's go. Let's go. Why are we still staying here? Do we want to die? A Class 6 Radiant Saint Master said with a trembling voice before immediately gathering the other Radiant Saint Masters to form a white cloud. They hurriedly stepped onto it and fled. The other Radiant Saint Masters all returned to their senses. As soon as they thought about the terror of a Class 7 magical beast, they could not help but shiver inside. They no longer dared to stay there any longer, immediately fleeing as quickly as they could. A cold light flashed through Jianqin's eyes as he watched them leave. He did not plan on letting them go. Although the existence of the Class 7 magical beast pressured Jianqin slightly, it was not as severe as the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. However, just when Jianqin wanted to chase after them, the surviving black crows in the surroundings all roared out furiously. They all stared at Jianqin with bloodshot eyes and charged toward Jianqin as quickly as they could. Clearly, they wanted to avenge their dead Class 6 magical beast. Since you want to die so much, I'll fulfill your wish. Jianqin's eyes flashed with a strong murderous intent. The rain that filled the sky immediately condensed in front of him and then shot towards the surrounding black crow beasts like lightning. A while later, when Jianqin had slaughtered all the black crow beasts, the Radiant Saint Masters had already fled. The corpses of the black crow beasts had piled up into a small hill on the ground below him. Blood flowed like a river, and the air was filled with the dazzling smell of blood. Jianqin slowly dispersed the Radiant Saint force before him. He glanced in the direction the Radiant Saint Masters had vanished in and gently said, "Count yourself lucky this time. If I see you again, I'll send you off." Jianqin arrived before the corpse of the Class 6 Black Crow Beast King several dozen meters away. He condensed a radiant sword in his right hand and directly stabbed it into the Black Crow Beast King's body. He removed a fist-sized monster core from the corpse with great familiarity. Jianqin finally smiled faintly as he looked at the Class 6 monster core in his hand. He had discovered a Class 6 magical beast hiding among the black crows long ago, and his objective had actually been the Class 6 monster core. Basically, all Class 6 magical beasts gathered in the depths of the Cross Mountains, which was why there were so few of them on the Tianyuan continent. As a result, Class 6 monster cores were extremely precious and rare, almost becoming a commodity that could not be bought even if one had the money. I wonder if Ming Dong has successfully broken through to Heaven's Saint Master. If he has, he'll be able to use this Class 6 monster core, Jianqin murmured to himself. Although he had quite a few Class 5 monster cores in his space ring, Class 5 monster cores were no longer of much use to Heaven's Saint Masters. Only Class 6 monster cores would be of use to experts at that level of cultivation. Soon after, Jianqin frowned slightly and became distressed. He murmured, "It's a pity that the space ring has been sealed by the power of the saint artifact here. I can't open it at all. Once the number of Class 6 monster cores increases, it'll be very difficult to carry them around." As soon as he said that, Jianqin seemed to have thought of something. His eyes suddenly lit up. Since the space ring has been sealed by the power of the Saint artifact, can I use the artifact spirit to undo the seal? Thinking up to there, Jianqin immediately became excited. He called out, "Is the artifact spirit here?" "Exalted One, I'm here." As soon as Jianqin finished speaking, the artifact spirit's voice rang out by his ear. The white-robed middle-aged man had silently appeared by Jianqin's side. "Artifact spirit, can you undo the seal on my space ring?" Jianqin asked the artifact spirit. He was slightly excited inside. Hearing that, the artifact spirit finally remembered that it had sealed Jianqin's space ring. Its face immediately changed, and it said in panic, "Please don't be angry, Exalted One. I didn't seal your space ring on purpose. I'll undo the seal right now." The artifact spirit immediately removed the seal on Jianqin's space ring. Jianqin checked the space ring and found that the powerful energy that sealed the space ring had indeed disappeared. This made him immediately happy. In this way, wouldn't he be able to take out everything he had obtained in here? Even the problem of the magic core would be solved completely. Jianqin immediately put the Class 6 magic core into the space ring. Then he looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Artifact spirit, are there Class 7 magical beasts in this artifact space?" The artifact spirit dared not ignore Jianqin's question. It immediately said, "Yes, Exalted One, there are indeed many Class 7 magical beasts in this space. There are even a few Class 8 magical beasts." "What? There are Class 8 magical beasts here?" Jianqin was shocked. He could no longer remain calm because Class 8 magical beasts were equivalent to the Holy Emperor. And from the artifact spirit's words, Jianqin could tell that there were more than one Class 8 magical beasts that were equivalent to the Holy Emperor. He found it hard to believe. How did those powerful magical beasts get in here? Jianqin immediately asked. He was very curious about all of this. "Exalted One, this artifact has existed for countless years. There were already some magical beasts in here before I gained intelligence. They lived here and cultivated here. As time passed, their strength would naturally increase. The Class 7 and Class 8 magical beasts now have their current strength after cultivating here for a very long time. They also have many descendants." The artifact spirit explained to Jianqin. "Then will they attack the Radiant Saint Masters who are participating in the competition?" Jianqin asked. "Supreme Venerable, those 7th and 8th rank demonic beasts have all been sealed by this lowly one. They won't be a threat to those contestants. Only when those contestants have completely left will those seals be released and their freedom be restored." The artifact spirit basically told Jianqin everything he knew. He did not hide anything at all. As for the matter of sealing the magical beasts, this was something that the artifact spirit had reached an agreement with the past presidents long ago. Jianqin secretly let out a sigh of relief. The huge roar from afar had indeed pressured him a little because Jianqin had already sensed the power of the Class 7 Black Crow. Even with his strength as a fighter, he might not be able to defeat it. At this moment, a visible red gas suddenly drifted out from the blood on the ground and gathered towards Jianqin. In the end, it all entered the body of the white tiger that was sleeping on Jianqin's shoulder. Seeing this, Jianqin was stunned. Clearly, he did not understand what was going on. The eyes of the artifact spirit flashed. It immediately stared at the white tiger on Jianqin's shoulder and said, "Exalted One, the magical beast on your shoulder is not simple. It can actually absorb the essence hidden in the blood of the magical beasts and absorb it." Jianqin immediately sensed it carefully. As expected, he sensed that the red gas drifting out from the blood actually contained traces of essence. The white tiger is now on the verge of breaking through. Could it be that the essence in the blood of the magical beasts can help the white tiger break through? Jianqin understood very quickly. He could not help but feel excited. "Exalted One, I can feel that after the magical beast on your shoulder absorbed the essence, It is actually strengthening at a very slow speed. If it absorbs enough essence, it will reach Class 6 in advance, the artifact spirit said. The artifact spirit's words confirmed Jianshin's guess. Jianshin let the artifact spirit leave with a trace of excitement. He stood there quietly by himself and slowly waited for the white tiger to absorb the essence floating out from the blood of the magical beasts. Very quickly, the essence in the blood of the Class 4 black crow beasts had been completely absorbed by the white tiger. At this moment, suddenly, red gas that was 100 times stronger than before drifted over from not far away. It slowly entered the white tiger's body and was absorbed by it. This was the essence of the Class 6 black crow beast king. Jianshin could clearly feel that the essence of the Class 6 magical beast king was much stronger and purer than the essence of thousands of Class 4 magical beasts to the white tiger. In order to help the white tiger break through as soon as possible, it seems that I have to look for more Class 6 magical beasts, Jianshin muttered to himself. After waiting for a while, when there was no more essence floating out, Jianshin left the place. At the same time, he used his warrior's strength to take away all the magic cores of the black crow beasts. With the artifact spirit as a cover, Jianshin was not afraid that his warrior's strength would be exposed, unless it was seen by the contestants. In the next few days, Jianshin collected battle records while hunting magical beasts. He used the essence hidden in the blood of the magical beasts to help the white tiger break through. In the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. In these 5 days, more than a dozen Class 6 magical beasts had died at the hands of Jianshin. There were even more Class 5 and Class 4 magical beasts. Not only did he obtain quite a few Class 6 magic cores, but the sleeping white tiger had also absorbed a large amount of essence, causing its entire body to emit a faint white light. This white light continued to grow as the white tiger absorbed more essence. However, some of the Class 6 magical beasts that Jianshin had killed had backers. Some were the descendants of Class 7 magical beasts, and some were the subordinates of Class 7 magical beasts. Their deaths made the Class 7 magical beasts furious. They let out earth-shattering roars that echoed throughout the entire artifact space, causing the contestants in the artifact space to discuss spiritedly. They were terrified. Only a few people who understood the artifact space very well were able to remain calm. Chapter 766. 5 days later, Jianshin arrived above a forest. He slowly flew at a low altitude as he stood on a white cloud condensed from radiant Saint Force. He expanded the senses of his soul to a radius of 20 kilometers as he searched for Class 6 magical beasts and the other participants. Jianshin flew at a low altitude above the trees. He glanced at the white tiger on his shoulder and murmured, "The energy within Little White's body has begun to pulse unstably. Looks like it's at the critical moment of breaking through to Class 6. Since that's the case, I'll put aside the matter of collecting battle achievements in the artifact space for now. It won't be too late to continue collecting battle achievements after I assist the white tiger in breaking through. There's still 10 days until the competition anyway, so there's plenty of time. Once the white tiger becomes a Class 6 magical beast, it'll be equivalent to a human Heaven Saint Master. And with its identity as a winged tiger, its battle prowess will definitely be much greater than other magical beasts. Even beasts of antiquity will be nowhere close to it. At that time, the white tiger will possess some ability to protect itself on the Tian-Yuan continent. Unless it encounters a saint ruler, no one will be able to harm it. Roar!" Just as Jianshin was deep in thought, a great roar suddenly rang out from up ahead. The sound wave rolled out, reverberating through the surroundings. A Class 6 magical beast. Jianshin's eyes lit up as he stared ahead in interest. He murmured, "This should be a Class 6 magical beast that has reached the peak. The vital energies in its blood are extremely dense, and its voice is filled with anger and pain. It looks like someone is fighting with it." Without any hesitation, Jianshin immediately sped up and flew in the direction of the sound. Over a dozen Radiant Saint Masters were scattered in groups of 3 in a dense forest 30 kilometers in front of Jianshan. Milky white light constantly flickered, turning into radiant swords that shot toward the 6-meter-long Black Panther. The Black Panther had already reached the peak of Class 6. Its battle prowess was extremely great, but even with that being the case, it still struggled to fend off the attacks of over a dozen Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. It was currently injured in many places and covered in blood. Its black fur had already been dyed red. Roar! The Black Panther constantly growled. Its vicious eyes were scarlet red. Not only did its wounds fail to decrease its battle prowess, but they also made it even more brutal. It became more and more valiant as it fought. As it constantly swung its front paws, powerful strands of energy shot toward the Radiant Saint Masters in the surroundings, one after another. The Panther would spit out violent balls of energy from time to time. The Radiant Saint Masters in the surroundings dealt with the attacks of the Panther in an orderly fashion. They formed groups of 3, with 2 of them blocking the attacks of the Panther, while the other constantly condensed radiant swords to attack the Panther. Clearly, their teamwork had been honed for many years. More and more wounds appeared on the Panther. Even though its defenses were very great, it was unable to last for very long against the constant attacks of the radiant swords. Roar! Suddenly, the Panther roared at the sky, bearing the price of 3 radiant swords. It arrived before one of the groups with a single leap. It opened its huge mouth and bit at one of them without any hesitation at all. The Radiant Saint Master was unable to react in time. His entire upper body was bitten by the Panther. In that moment of danger, a huge pillar of light descended from the sky, taking the Radiant Saint Master with it and disappearing from the artifact space. Clearly, this was not the first time the Panther had seen this happen. It ignored the huge pillar of light and did not pause at all. It immediately charged toward a second Radiant Saint Master and viciously swiped its sharp claws at the Radiant Saint Master's chest. Crack! The Radiant Saint Master's radiant armor was as fragile as tofu. It was directly shattered by the Panther's attack, turning the Radiant Saint Master's chest into a bloody mess. Arg! The Radiant Saint Master cried out miserably as he was directly blown away. He vomited blood in the air as his face paled. The Panther ignored the Radiant Saint Master. It opened its huge mouth and bit at the 3rd Radiant Saint Master. Radiant Sword. The Radiant Saint Master did not become flustered at all. The radiant sword that he had just condensed immediately turned into a white streak of light, shooting into the Panther's mouth with lightning speed. Boom! The radiant sword exploded loudly after entering the Panther's mouth. A powerful pulse of energy leaked out from the Panther's mouth, causing it to wail out in pain. Blood constantly flowed from its mouth. At the same time, the Panther's huge mouth bit down on the Radiant Saint Master, swallowing his entire upper body. At the brink of death, another huge pillar of light descended from the sky, taking the 2nd Radiant Saint Master with it and disappearing from the artifact space. Quick! Attack its wounds with all your strength! A Radiant Saint Master in another direction immediately called out. Soon afterwards, over a dozen Radiant Saint Masters realized that this was a great opportunity to heavily injure the Panther. All of them immediately began to condense Radiant Saint Force and shoot it at the clearly deeper wounds on the Panther at the same time. They planned on using those wounds to deal fatal damage to the Panther. Swish! 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 Over a dozen radiant swords shot out from the hands of the Radiant Saint Masters at basically the same time. They struck the wounds on the Panther with great precision, immediately widening them. Blood spurted out like a fountain. The Black Panther produced a chilling cry. He glanced at the Radiant Saint Masters with eyes filled with endless hatred before leaping into the distance, fleeing into the distance. At this moment, a huge radiant sword that was 3 meters long shot down from the sky. It turned into a streak of light and chased after the fleeing Black Panther with astonishing force. In the end, it struck the Black Panther's wound viciously, worsening its injuries. The strike was extremely powerful. It was several times more powerful than the radiant swords shot out by the radiant Saint Masters. The huge panther was actually knocked into the air by the strike, landing heavily 3 meters away. A bone-deep wound appeared where it had been injured on its back. Even its organs were exposed. Roar! The panther produced a painful cry. The damage from the strike was just too great. This Class 6 magical beast can't hold on much longer. Let's go. We can't let anyone take it away. The Radiant Saint Masters who had attacked the panther earlier yelled out. They all rushed toward the panther as surging Radiant Saint Masters rapidly condensed in their hands, quickly forming radiant swords. They then shot them at the panther with a wave of their hands. They wanted to kill the panther as soon as possible and take its monster core. The radiant swords struck the panther, causing it to become even more heavily injured. The panther had already lost its ability to flee. All it could do was lie on the ground and produce painful growls. The vitality of Class 6 magical beasts was just too tenacious. The panther actually managed to survive the combined attacks of over a dozen Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. A figure rapidly approached from the distant sky. A white-robed Radiant Saint Master hurried over on a white cloud. 3 radiant swords had already been condensed in his hands. He quickly flew over in a straight line, striking the deep wound on the panther's neck with great precision. Boom! 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 Following 3 violent explosions, the head of the Black Panther, which was 1 meter in diameter, separated from its body. It was directly sent flying into the air by the powerful energy shockwaves. Its head was separated from its body, and blood splattered all over the sky. The Class 6 magical beast that had fought against over a dozen Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters for almost an hour had died to Genshin's hands just like that. Go collect the monster core! A Radiant Saint Master immediately called out. Immediately, a few people ran over to the panther's corpse in an attempt to retrieve the monster core as soon as possible. At this moment, a few more radiant swords shot over from the sky. This time, their targets were actually the Radiant Saint Masters who ran over to the panther's corpse. The expressions of all the Radiant Saint Masters changed. They all snorted coldly and condensed a radiant sword. A portion of them shot toward the radiant swords that had attacked their companions, blocking Genshin's attacks. The other portion shot toward Genshin, who was flying over from afar. A radiant shield that was 2 meters in diameter appeared in Genshin's hand. He directly tossed it out and blocked all the radiant swords. Genshin did not slow down at all. He flew over the Radiant Saint Masters and landed firmly before the panther's corpse. He immediately condensed a radiant sword and stabbed it into the panther's body, removing the monster core hidden within. His movements were smooth and extremely practiced. The Radiant Saint Masters' faces became extremely ugly when they saw that the monster core had been taken away. They all glared at Genshin with hostility. Sir, it took us a lot of effort to heavily injure and kill this Class 6 magical beast, so the monster core should belong to us. Now that it's been taken away by you, sir, your actions seem to be rather inappropriate, an elder said with a cold expression. An old man said coldly with a sunken face. He could already tell that Jian Chen's strength was extraordinary from the short clash earlier. Otherwise, why would he waste so much time talking to Genshin? He would have directly charged at Genshin with his advantage in numbers. Sir, return the monster core to us, and we'll forget about what happened before. We'll go our separate ways in the future and mind our own business, another Radiant Saint Master said sternly. Another Radiant Saint Master growled. His gaze towards Chen was filled with some fear. Over a dozen of them had actually failed to stop Genshin at all, allowing him to arrive before Heibao's corpse with great composure. They dared not offend Genshin so easily. Genshin grabbed a handful of grass from the ground and wiped away the blood on the monster core. Afterward, he looked at the Radiant Saint Masters and said indifferently, "Not only do I want the monster core, but I want your battle achievements as well." The faces of the Radiant Saint Masters all changed when they heard that. Fury rose up in their hearts. In their eyes, Jianqin was simply arrogant and condescending. He had gone a little too far. Not only had he taken their spoils, but he also wanted their battle achievements. This was a blatant provocation to them. Even though they knew that Jianqin's strength was extraordinary, they did not believe that Jianqin could fend off all of them by himself. They feared Jianqin because they did not want to provoke an expert like him so easily. It did not mean that they feared him. Chapter 767. The Radiant Saint Masters were infuriated by Jianqin. They all began to condense radiant swords to attack Jianqin. They shot out from their hands, shooting toward Jianqin mercilessly. They were confident that even if Jianqin was very powerful, he would not be able to fend off all of them by himself. This was because they were not weak either, and their teamwork was extremely good. Jianqin condensed a radiant shield with a diameter of 2 meters in front of him with his left hand, while he condensed 6 radiant swords in his right hand. The 6 radiant swords split into 3 different directions, shooting toward 3 of the Radiant Saint Masters. The first 3 radiant swords directly shattered the radiant armor on the 3 Radiant Saint Masters, while the last 3 radiant swords mercilessly struck the 3 Radiant Saint Masters who were not protected by radiant armor. They directly pierced through their bodies and into their chests. Just as they were facing a huge threat to their lives, 3 huge pillars of light descended from the sky, enveloping their bodies and disappearing from sight. At the same time, the radiant swords landed on the radiant shield before Jianqin. With a great boom, Jianqin's radiant shield shattered loudly, but the fragments did not vanish. Instead, they shot forward as streaks of light, enveloping the 2 Radiant Saint Masters. The 2 Radiant Saint Masters had never thought that the fragments of the radiant shield would be able to harm people. Caught off guard, countless fragments directly shot into their bodies. Quite a few fragments even shot toward their hearts and throats, 2 fatal spots. Another 2 huge pillars of light descended from the sky, sweeping up the 2 Radiant Saint Masters and disappearing from the artifact space. In just a single clash, 5 Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters had been slain by Jianqin. As a result, only 7 people remained out of the original group. The remaining 7 Radiant Saint Masters had become stunned. They all stared at Jianqin with pale white faces as deep fear filled their eyes. Jianqin's strength had completely exceeded their expectations. They had never thought that Jianqin would be able to kill 5 of their companions in such a short amount of time. Even though all of this had happened right before their eyes, they still struggled to accept it. They struggled to believe it. Is he a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master? At that moment, the 7 remaining Radiant Saint Masters all thought the same thing. In their eyes, only a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master could kill 5 Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters in such an unimaginable manner. At this moment, another 7 radiant swords condensed before Jianqin. They pulsed with energy from Radiant Saint Force. They were no weaker than a full-powered strike from a Saint Master. Run! The 7 remaining Radiant Saint Masters were shocked. They all fled in panic, no longer daring to stay behind and oppose Jianqin. They felt extremely regretful. If they had known earlier that Jianqin was so powerful, they would never have dared to ask for a Class 6 monster core from Jianqin. Jianqin did not plan on sparing them. Several radiant swords shot out with lightning speed, striking the backs of the 7 Radiant Saint Masters mercilessly. The radiant armor on the 7 Radiant Saint Masters was shattered. The powerful shock waves surged into their bodies, causing their fragile bodies to suffer extremely great damage. They could not help but vomit blood as they lost their balance and fell to the ground. Rain of the sky! Jianqin bellowed out. Surging Radiant Saint Force immediately condensed into bean-sized droplets of rain, which all rained down on the Radiant Saint Masters. The Radiant Saint Masters had already lost the ability to resist. They could only watch as the sharp droplets of rain enveloped them. Their eyes were filled with despair. This was the despair of making it to the top 10. The power of the Saint artifact appeared in time. A few huge pillars of light descended from the sky, sweeping up the 7 of them and making them vanish in a single instance. Jianshin's Rain of the Sky struck the ground as well. The violent energy within the droplets of rain erupted, blowing the soil into the air. Dust filled the surroundings. After the Radiant Saint Masters were swept away by the power of the Saint artifact, they all left behind one or several finger-sized specks of white light. Clearly, the Radiant Saint Masters had obtained some of the battle achievements of others. Now, there were almost 30 specks of white light left behind. Jianshin used the jade pendant to absorb the white specks of light in the air. As a result, his battle achievements had reached over 100. He had reached a fifth of what he needed to make it to the top 10. Jianshan was not in a hurry because he knew that there were Radiant Saint Masters fighting everywhere in the artifact space. The battle achievements he obtained from the participants were relatively fewer in the early stages. Once all the battle achievements were gathered from a small number of Radiant Saint Masters, he could easily obtain several dozen or even over 100 battle achievements from any random Radiant Saint Master he came across. After collecting the battle achievements, Jianshin arrived before the corpse of the Class 6 magical beast. Immediately, a red gas drifted out from the blood of the panther, which was absorbed by the white tiger in the end. The Black Panther's strength had already reached the peak of the 6th step. The essence, energy, and spirit contained in its blood was clearly much more powerful than that of ordinary 6th step magical beasts. After absorbing the essence, the white light emitted by the little white tiger grew more and more intense. Very soon, it formed a dazzling white light that wrapped around the little white tiger's entire body, making its petite body faintly discernible. Very soon, all the vital energies within the blood had been absorbed by the white tiger. Jianshin glanced at the white tiger sleeping on his shoulder and immediately frowned. He began to feel troubled inside. This was because the white tiger's current appearance was far too conspicuous. If the other contestants were to see it like this, then the uniqueness of the white tiger would be impossible to hide. Once the other contestants went out and spread the news, the uniqueness of the white tiger would quickly be known by the various large clans, thus attracting widespread attention. Although they might not be able to see through the true identity of the white tiger, it was better to be safe than sorry. If someone with extraordinary knowledge were to recognize the identity of the white tiger, then it would undoubtedly be a very frightening thing. This was definitely not a result that Jianshin wanted to see. Jianshin muttered to himself for a while, then immediately flew into the air. He found a mountain range several dozen kilometers away and opened up a cave in a very hidden place. He then placed the white tiger in the depths of the cave, intending to wait for the white tiger to break through. Jianshin sat 5 meters away from the white tiger with his eyes closed. He planned to accompany the white tiger as it broke through to prevent any accidents from happening. He sat there for 3 days. During those 7 days, the white light from the white tiger became more and more intense, but it still failed to break through. After waiting for 3 days, Jianshin finally couldn't sit still any longer. He stood up from the ground and stared at the little white tiger wrapped in white light with a vexed expression. Looking at the little white tiger's current state, it probably wouldn't be able to smoothly break through to the 6th rank even if it was given another half a month's time. And within the artifact space, Jianshin didn't have that much time to wait. No, I can't keep waiting like this. The white tiger's current state is not suitable for being taken out of the artifact space, or it will definitely attract the attention of many people. Since the essence of a Class 6 magical beast's blood can help the white tiger break through, I'll go hunt a Class 6 magical beast, Jianshin murmured to himself. He then immediately turned around and left the cave. For the sake of the white tiger's safety, he no longer cared about hiding his strength as a cultivator. He directly used his Saint Ruler ability to cast down a powerful barrier around the entrance of the cave, enveloping the entire cave. That way, no one could enter the barrier, no matter how hard they tried. After doing all that, Jianqin used branches to cover the entrance of the cave, ensuring that it was completely covered. He then left to hunt Class 6 magical beasts in the distance. In the blink of an eye, another 2 days passed. A total of 10 days had passed in the artifact space. There were only 5 days left before the competition ended. During these 2 days, Jianqin gave up on competing with the other participants. He focused on finding and killing Class 6 magical beasts before throwing the corpses into his space ring so that the white tiger could absorb the essence of the blood. Helping the white tiger break through had become the top priority for Jianqin right now, so he set aside the top 10 without any hesitation. In these 2 days, Jianqin had killed over 10 Class 6 magical beasts, providing the white tiger with a large amount of essence to help it break through. After absorbing the essence of the Class 6 magical beasts, the white tiger took a step closer to breaking through. The white light around it had completely solidified, turning into a huge cocoon. Today, 8 white-robed Radiant Saint Masters flew over a mountain range on a white cloud. Aside from the woman at the very front, the other 7 were all men of various ages. Aside from the woman, the other 7 all carried bulging bags on their backs. The bags were completely made from beast hides. Chapter 768. The woman at the very front was devastatingly beautiful. She was the young lady of the Kara clan, the person who ranked first among the 10 great Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, Kara Livy. A sliver of thought appeared in Kara Livy's eyes. She gently stroked her messy hair with her right hand and said softly, "Although I've never met Yang Yutian, I've heard quite a lot about him from Elder Lu. If I really have to compare Yang Yutian to Yun Tian, I clearly favor Yang Yutian more. However, I wonder who Yang Yutian is and whether he's someone who can accomplish great things. Although Yun Tian's offer is very generous, I don't trust him very much. As a result, it's best if we don't choose a side before personally meeting Yang Yutian." The young lady is right. The Radiant Saint Master Union is an extremely powerful force. Yang Yutian and Yun Tian will both be successors of the Union in the future, but the two of them are on opposing sides now. Once one of them fails, they'll be doomed. As a result, we can't be careless at a time like this. Once we stand on the wrong side, our Kara clan might become the Union's enemy as well. A middle-aged man said in agreement. Although this was an internal matter of the Radiant Saint Masters, and they could choose not to participate, it was still a great opportunity to rope in the Union. Their Kara clan would not give up on this opportunity so easily. While they were talking, they were flying over a mountain range. However, at this moment, Kara Liwei, who was flying at the front, had a flash in her eyes. Her body that was flying at high speed immediately stopped and stared down with a sharp gaze. The people behind her all stopped as well. They all stared down in interest. They knew that their young lady had probably discovered something when she acted like that. However, they failed to find anything amiss even after staring at the mountain range for quite some time. They could not help but begin to doubt themselves. Immediately, one of them could not help but ask, "Young lady, what have you discovered?" Kara Livy gradually became stern. She said, "I can feel a strange power below. It seems to be a barrier that only Saint Rulers can use." A gleam of light flashed through the eyes of the 7 Radiant Saint Masters when they heard that. They did not find it strange that Kara Livy could sense the power of the barrier because they all knew that the young lady before them had been extraordinary since she was young. Not only could she sense Radiant Saint Force as a Radiant Saint Master, she could even sense the powers of the other elements. Ever since she became a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, she was able to sense the force of the world that only Saint Rulers could control. The only flaw was that she could only sense the existence of the other elements and force of the world, but she could not control them. The barrier used by Saint rulers was formed from world force as well, so Karalivy could obviously sense it. Wait for me for a moment, I'll go down and take a look. Karalivy directly landed in the dense forest. Following the feeling in her heart, she finally found a cave in a place covered by branches. Karalivy carefully observed her surroundings, and a gleam of light flashed through her eyes. She murmured, "The tree branch hasn't dried up yet, so it's clearly been broken recently. And this cave seems to have been dug out recently as well. Who did this?" Karalivy furrowed her brows tightly. She seemed to think of something, and her face changed slightly. She murmured to herself, "There's a barrier in a newly dug cave. Is there a saint ruler in the artifact space?" Although she came to a conclusion like that, Karalivy showed no fear at all. It was not like she had never seen a saint ruler before. She had even come into contact with the Holy Emperor quite a few times, so a saint ruler was unable to make Karalivy feel pressured at all. Karalivy stared at the pitch-black cave and hesitated. She then raised her slender arm slightly, and a powerful, radiant sword immediately condensed in her jade-white hand. With a shake of her hand, the radiant sword turned into a streak of white light and shot into the cave like a bolt of lightning. Boom! A violent roar suddenly came from within the cave, and a surge of energy gushed out from the cave. It actually doubled the size of the 2-meter-tall cave, and the entire mountain trembled slightly with this attack. The enchantment was hidden inside the cave. When Karalivy's attack hit the enchantment didn't even shake. At the same time, several hundred kilometers away, the white-robed Gentian had just killed a Class 6 poisonous demon scorpion. Just when he was about to put the scorpion into his space ring, a gleam of light suddenly flashed through his eyes. It called out, "Oh no, the barrier has been attacked. Looks like the white tiger's hiding spot has been exposed. I need to hurry back immediately." Gentian changed his unhurried actions from before. With a wave of his hand, he cleanly put the huge corpse of the scorpion into his space ring before hurrying back as quickly as he could. Outside the cave, the disturbance caused by Karalivy alarmed the Radiant Saint Masters in the sky. They immediately landed beside Karalivy and asked, "Young miss, what happened?" Karalivy was silent. She stared intently at the boundary hidden in the depths of the cave. She cupped her fist towards the cave entrance and said, "I am a member of the Kara family. May I know which senior is cultivating in seclusion here?" Karalivy did not want to destroy the barrier with her attack earlier. Instead, she wanted to alarm the person inside. Although her actions were rather impolite, Karalivy did not take a saint ruler seriously at all. With her status in the Kara clan, there was no need for her to bow before a saint ruler. "Is there a saint ruler here?" The other Radiant Saint Masters all stared at the entrance of the cave. They were all surprised. This was the first time they had heard of a saint ruler in the artifact space. They waited outside the cave for a while, but they did not receive any response. "Young miss, let's go. Perhaps the senior doesn't want to see us, so there's no need for us to waste time here." A while later, a middle-aged man finally lost his patience and suggested from one side. Karalivy sank into her thoughts and gently sighed, "Then let's go." With that, they turned around to leave. However, at this moment, a tremendous presence suddenly appeared from the cave. The presence was filled with supreme dignity and dominance, as if a supreme ruler had descended. It broke through the barrier and rapidly expanded outwards, enveloping the entire mountain range very quickly. Karalivy and the others paused. Their figures that were about to leave stopped abruptly. Each of them stood on a white cloud and floated in the air, staring intently at the cave. No, the presence is powerful, but it's nowhere near as powerful as a saint ruler. "There's something strange about this place," an old man said with a deep voice as he stared at the cave. "This aura is filled with majesty and dominance. Moreover, I can faintly sense a berserk aura mixed within. Could it be that the person hiding inside is a bloodthirsty person?" A middle-aged man's face darkened slightly. No. Kara Livy gently shook her head. She stared at the cave with a strange light in her eyes and slowly said, "If I've guessed correctly, the presence is actually from a magical beast." "What? A magical beast?" The 7 Radiant Saint Masters were all surprised by Kara Livy's words, but after thinking about it carefully, they felt that the young miss was right. This magical beast isn't powerful, so how is it able to use a barrier to protect itself? And from the looks of it, it seems to be in the process of breaking through. Moreover, it's breaking through from Class 5 to Class 6. Otherwise, if it's a Class 7 magical beast, its aura is definitely not something we can withstand. An old man analyzed carefully, but his heart was filled with doubt. "Let's just wait here and see." Kara Livy remained calm, but the light in her eyes constantly flickered. Afterwards, they quietly hovered there and waited. They all wanted to see what was happening. An hour later, a white streak of light suddenly flew over from afar at an extremely fast speed. Its target was Kara Livy and the others. The arrival of the person immediately attracted the attention of Kara Livy and the others. A cold light flashed through the eyes of many of them, and one of them immediately sneered, "That person is bold enough to barge in here alone, so he must be quite powerful. He should have quite a few battle achievements. Haha, the young miss just happens to lack some battle achievements. Why don't we collect all of that person's battle achievements? I just hope that his battle achievements won't disappoint us too much." An old man laughed aloud. The figure in the distance arrived before them very soon, standing 20 meters away from them. At this moment, Kara Livy finally saw the person's appearance. He was an extremely handsome young man who seemed to be in his 20s. However, what surprised Kara Livy was that she actually saw some resoluteness on the young man's handsome face. This resoluteness would only appear on fighters who had gone through many trials of life and death. However, it had actually appeared on a Radiant Saint Master who had always lived like a prince. This left Kara Livy extremely surprised. Coupled with the young man's cold gaze, it even gave Kara Livy the illusion that the young man before her was not a Radiant Saint Master, but a fighter who had gone through many trials and tribulations. However, what surprised Kara Livy the most was that her appearance didn't affect the young man in front of her at all. His cold gaze didn't even linger on her face for a moment. It was just an indifferent glance. In the past, there had always been a person who either immediately became infatuated or burned with desire when they saw her appearance. Even a few saint rulers would show a sliver of admiration when they saw her appearance. There had never been anyone who could remain calm after seeing her for the first time, or even look at her coldly. This made Kara Livy feel that the young man before her was clearly different from those people. "Brat, obediently leave behind your battle achievements and then forfeit. That way, you won't have to suffer." A middle-aged man behind Kara Livy stared coldly at Genshin and said with a deep voice. A cold light flashed through Genshin's eyes when he heard that. Raising his hand, a radiant sword immediately condensed in front of him. What speed of condensation! The people on the other side all became surprised when they saw what Genshin had done. Even Kara Livy's eyes suddenly narrowed. Her gaze towards Genshin had changed slightly because Genshin had condensed Radiant Saint Force just too quickly. Even she could not match up to him. Radiant armor. The Radiant Saint Masters of the Kara clan were all experienced, so they reacted very quickly. They immediately used radiant armor to protect themselves as quickly as they could and prepared for battle. At the same time, the radiant sword in Genshin's hand shot toward the person who had spoken with lightning speed. It directly dispersed the incomplete radiant armor in front of him before viciously striking the chest of the Class 6, Radiant Saint Master. Chapter 769. Genshin's actions immediately infuriated the Radiant Saint Masters of the Kara clan. Aside from Kara Livy, all the other Radiant Saint Masters began to condense radiant swords. The 6 radiant swords shot toward Genshin at the same time. Genshin's gaze was cold. He raised his left hand slightly, and the radiant saint force in the surroundings rapidly condensed. In the blink of an eye, it actually condensed into a huge shield in front of him. At the same time, another 3 radiant swords condensed in Jianshin's right hand. Boom! The 6 radiant swords collided with Jianshin's shield, immediately producing a violent boom. The 6 radiant Saint Masters were not weak. They were far more powerful than the radiant Saint Masters Jianshin had encountered before. His radiant shield only managed to block 3 radiant swords before shattering. The remaining 3 radiant swords continued toward Jianshin without slowing down all. Jianshin remained composed. He gently waved his right hand, and the 3 radiant swords condensed before him immediately shot out with lightning-like speed. They collided with the 3 incoming radiant swords. The radiant swords condensed by Jianshin were clearly more powerful than the radiant swords condensed by the radiant Saint Masters. When the 6 radiant swords collided in the air, they immediately shattered. Jianshin's radiant swords continued toward the 3 radiant Saint Masters. However, after being weakened earlier, they were clearly much weaker. Swish! 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 The 3 radiant swords struck the chests of the 3 radiant Saint Masters with lightning-like speed, causing their radiant armor to become covered in cracks. The 3 radiant Saint Masters immediately vomited blood from the violent impact. Their faces paled in an instant. The radiant Saint Masters of the Kara clan were all shocked. They stared at Jianshin in disbelief. Jianshin's strength had shocked them. What shocked them even more was that they had never even heard of such a powerful radiant Saint Master. They found this very hard to believe. Their Kara clan had basically collected information on all Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. Although it was impossible for them to know every single Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, they still paid great attention to a few powerful ones. Kara Livy also became extremely stern. She was extremely shocked by the strength of the young man before her. As the strongest Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, she actually did not have any confidence in defeating him. Jianshin did not stop at all because of their shock. With a thought, a few more powerful radiant swords condensed before him. He could already sense the changes in the white tiger. He needed to kill these people as quickly as possible and then return to the cave to check on the white tiger's situation. Yang Yutian, stop! We're from the Kara clan. We don't want to become your enemy. At this moment, Kara Livy suddenly called out. Although she had never seen Jianshin before, she had already guessed Jianshin's identity. What? Yang Yutian? He's Yang Yutian? Kara Livy's call surprised the other Radiant Saint Masters of the Kara clan, but they soon came to a realization. An extremely unfamiliar Class 6 Radiant Saint Master actually possessed such unbelievable strength. Not only was he able to deal with them so easily when they worked together, but he had even heavily injured 3 of them. The only person who could achieve this was the 3rd disciple of the Union, Yang Yutian, who had also grasped a forbidden technique and killed over 30 Heaven Saint Masters, all by himself. After learning the identity of the young man, the gazes of the Radiant Saint Masters of the Kara clan toward Jianshin immediately changed. The anger in their eyes vanished because they all understood that it was extremely likely for the young man to become the president of the Union in the future. He was an important figure that they could not afford to offend. Jianshin's hand paused slightly as he stared at Kara Livy in some surprise. He had not been enchanted by Kara Livy's alluring beauty. His face remained as cold as before as he asked, "You're from the Kara clan?" Kara Livy's limpid eyes stared at Jianshin with some mixed feelings. She had never thought that meeting Yang Yutian would be like this. After what had happened earlier, Kara Livy had personally witnessed Yang Yutian's coldness, decisiveness, and viciousness, as well as his great strength. This allowed Kara Livy, who did not understand Yang Yutian at all, to finally understand what kind of person Yang Yutian was. Although Yang Yutian was only 24 years old, Kara Livy understood that Yang Yutian was completely different from regular Radiant Saint Masters after what had happened earlier. He could not be underestimated, nor could he be measured by age. That's right. We are indeed from the Kara clan. Yang Yutian, our Kara clan has no intentions of becoming enemies with you. What happened earlier was only a misunderstanding. Kara Livy looked at Jianqin and said softly, the moment she saw Yang Yutian, she immediately gave up on working with Yun Tian. This was because Kara Livy understood that Yang Yutian could not be offended. If he was offended, the consequences would definitely be much more severe than offending Yun Tian. Both Yang Yutian's talent and strength far surpassed Yun Tian's. Kara Livy could even sense a faint presence of slaughter from Yang Yutian. This was definitely not something that Yun Tian possessed. Jianqin fell silent for a while before gradually dispersing the radiant sword. He said emotionlessly, "You can go. Leave immediately." The Kara clan was one of the 3 great clans of the Holy Emperor's empire. They controlled a third of the Holy Emperor's empire's lifeline. At the same time, they possessed the strength of an ancient clan, which made Jianqin extremely fearful. He did not want to provoke the Kara clan over such a small matter. Most importantly, the Qinhuang kingdom was dependent on the Kara family. If he had a falling out with the Kara family, and his identity was exposed in the future, it would affect the Qinhuang kingdom. Seeing that Jianqin did not pursue the matter from before, the people from the Kara clan immediately let out a sigh of relief. This was because if their relationship with Jianqin deteriorated, it would probably affect their clan greatly. This was not something they wanted to see. Although one of them had been sent out by Jianqin due to the conflict earlier, it was not life-threatening. It was not a big deal. Now, the aura emitted from the white tiger's body was not something that Jianqin's barrier could block. The aura emitted from the cave was getting stronger and stronger. It covered an area of 100 miles, and this area was still expanding. The people from the Kara clan did not immediately leave. Kara Livy looked at the cave not far away. Then she asked Jianqin, "Yang Yutian, do you know the situation inside this cave?" Hearing this, Jianqin slightly frowned. He stared at the people from the Kara clan impatiently and coldly said, "You all leave this place immediately. Otherwise, I can only offend you." Before chasing these people away, it was not convenient for Jianqin to enter the cave at all. This was because the barrier inside was difficult to explain, and he could not allow the white tiger's identity to be exposed. Jianqin's rude and unreasonable behavior caused the expressions of Kara Livy and the others to change slightly, especially Kara Livy. As the young lady of the Kara clan, she had never been yelled at like this before. "Yang Yutian, we discovered this cave first. Can't we even stay and take a look?" Kara Livy said with some dissatisfaction. Her beautiful face revealed some unconcealable anger. If any other Radiant Saint Master had dared to speak to her like this, she definitely would not have been polite. However, when she thought of Jianqin's strength and terror, as well as the fact that it was extremely likely that he would become the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union in the future, Kara Livy could only swallow her anger. The aura in the cave was constantly rising, and Jianqin could clearly sense that the energy inside was becoming more and more unstable. This made Jianqin rather anxious. "People of the Kara clan, since you don't want to leave, I'll just have to do it," Jianqin said coldly. As soon as he finished speaking, the Radiant Saint force in the surroundings began to gather toward Jianqin. He pointed a finger at the sky and yelled, "Sword of Judgment!" In order to not waste any time, Jianqin no longer cared about anything else. Even if he had to offend the Kara clan, he would not hesitate to do so. Sword of Judgment, one of the 3 great theurgies. Yang Yutian. Kara Livy's expression changed drastically. She had never thought that Yang Yutian would actually attack them. Moreover, he had used one of the 3 great theurgies right from the start. It was as if he had some great enmity with the Kara clan. Kara Livy was extremely angry. In her opinion, this Yang Yutian was simply tyrannical and unreasonable. As the young lady of the Kara clan, her status was lofty. She had already spoken to him in such a humble manner. However, not only did the other party not appreciate her kindness, but he also wanted to fight because of her words of dissatisfaction. Kara Livy clenched her teeth. Her pair of beautiful eyes stared fiercely at Jianqin. She felt that her chest was about to explode from anger. However, when she saw the sword of judgment that was rapidly condensing above Jianqin's head, her expression became somewhat unsightly. Now that things had developed to this point, Kara Livy knew that if she and the others continued to stay, they might really have a conflict with Yang Yutian. Yang Yutian stopped quickly. "We'll leave immediately." Kara Livy's beautiful face was livid with anger. She called out to everyone, then immediately left and soon disappeared into the distance. After they left, the sword of judgment above Jianqin's head slowly dissipated. He didn't want to offend the Kara clan unless it was a last resort. Part of the reason was because he was afraid of the Kara clan, and the other part was also for the sake of the Qin Empire. After watching Kara Livy's group leave, Jianqin's figure flashed and entered the cave. His body passed through the barrier without the slightest hindrance. Kara Livy's group stopped 50 miles away. At this moment, their faces were very ugly. They were all livid with anger. This Yang Yutian has gone too far. He actually dares to treat the people of our Kara clan like this. Does he want to become enemies with our Kara clan? A middle-aged man said angrily, "This Yang Yutian is too arrogant. He's too domineering. Just because his talent is outstanding and he has a high chance of becoming the next president of the Radiant Saint Master Union, he doesn't take our Kara clan seriously." Humph. An old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion was also quite angry. Chapter 770. Kara Livy sucked in a deep breath and slowly calmed her anger. Everything that had happened before, from when Jianqin had arrived from afar to when they were chased away, slowly replayed in Kara Livy's head. Gradually, she discovered that something was wrong. Did you notice that when Yang Yutian first appeared, he directly flew towards the cave? He didn't rush over because he discovered our existence. It was as if his target wasn't us, but the secret cave. In the end, he wanted us to leave immediately. Perhaps he wanted us to leave the cave. If we didn't leave, he wouldn't hesitate to become enemies with our Kara clan to chase us away. Clearly, he found something important in the cave and didn't want us to know about it. Kara Livy was a clever person. Now that she had calmed down, she quickly realized the crux of the problem. Hearing that, the eyes of the other 6 Radiant Saint Masters of the Kara clan immediately lit up. One of them immediately said, "From what the young miss has said, I also think that's the case. Yang Yutian only wants us to leave the cave. Is there some kind of secret hidden in there?" From the presence, we can already sense that a Class 5 magical beast is breaking through in the cave. It's also rumored that Yang Yutian carries an extremely cute, snow-white cub with him at all times. Is the Class 5 magical beast breaking through in the cave the cub that accompanies Yang Yutian? A middle-aged man pondered. If the magical beast breaking through is the cub that accompanies Yang Yutian, then why is Yang Yutian so cautious? Even if the cub is extremely important to him, there's no need for him to risk becoming enemies with our Kara clan to chase us away. That's true. Also, what's with the barrier in the cave? The people of the Kara clan analyzed the situation one after another. However, as the results of their analysis gradually appeared, not only did it not resolve their questions, but it also made them even more confused. Kara Livy stood there in silence. A gleam of light flickered in her eyes. Clearly, she was also thinking about the problem. A while later, she slowly said, "No matter what, Yang Yutian definitely doesn't want us to see something. I've also checked the cave. It's newly excavated, so it's extremely likely that Yang Yutian created it. As for the barrier, did a saint ruler leave behind some barrier energy in Yang Yutian's body? As a result, Yang Yutian was able to cast down a barrier?" Kara Livy could not help but think of Jianqin's handsome, resolute face, and Jianshin's cold eyes. His decisiveness in killing and ruthlessness in his actions could only be seen on fighters who had experienced great storms and wandered the Tianyuan continent for many years. Their hands were also covered in blood. It was very rare for them to appear on a Radiant Saint Master, let alone a 24-year-old Radiant Saint Master. All of this sometimes made Kara Livy wonder whether Yang Yutian was a Radiant Saint Master or not. Just what kind of person is Yang Yutian? Why do I feel like he's more like a fighter than a Radiant Saint Master? Kara Livy was filled with curiosity. All of this had happened unknowingly after Jianshin had entered the artifact space. The slaughter in the artifact space seemed to have made Jianshin return to the days when he wandered the Tianyuan continent. It silently changed Jianshin's personality, silently awakening his deeply hidden presence. This was why Jianshin made Kara Livy feel this way. Let's not provoke Yang Yutian. I just feel like Yang Yutian isn't as simple as he seems on the surface, Kara Livy gently said before gradually leaving. Inside the cave, the little white tiger was already completely wrapped in a huge white cocoon with a diameter of 3 meters. The white cocoon emitted a dazzling white light that enveloped the entire cave. Inside, there was a layer of powerful energy that was fluctuating unstably. Jianshin sat 5 meters away as he stared at the white cocoon. He had tossed the corpse of the Class 6 magical beast beside the cocoon. Strands of red gas drifted out from the blood, being absorbed by the cocoon. After absorbing the essence of the Class 6 magical beast's blood, the energy within the cocoon became even more berserk. Even the aura it emitted became even more intense. It expanded from the initial range of 100 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers. I wonder how much longer it'll take for the white tiger to complete its breakthrough. Jianshin sat cross-legged 5 meters away with a trace of worry on his face. He could feel that the energy within the white cocoon was undergoing a qualitative change, and the essence in the blood of the magical beasts was the nourishment that could increase the speed of the transformation. However, the amount of essence in the blood that the white tiger required was just too much, so Jianshin didn't have the time to hunt a sufficient number of Class 6 magical beasts. However, without the vital energies in the blood, the white tiger would need an endless amount of time to complete its breakthrough. Jianshin did not have that much time to wait in the artifact space. Since the blood of magical beasts can increase the speed of the white tiger's breakthrough, and my chaotic body's blood is clearly much more powerful than magical beast blood, the effects might be much greater if I use my blood, Jianshin murmured. A sliver of determination appeared in his eyes. Immediately, an azulate sword chi appeared on his finger. With a wave of his hand, he sliced his wrist. However, when the sword chi struck Jianshin's wrist, it only left behind a faint white mark. The sword chi failed to penetrate Jianshin's chaotic body. Jianshin was slightly surprised. He immediately condensed all the chaotic force within him into the chaotic Naiden in his dantian, reducing the defenses of the chaotic body to a minimum. Afterward, he used the origin energy of the sword spirits to cut his wrist again. This time his wrist was indeed cut, but it only left a wound that was less than an inch long. Before blood could flow out, the wound automatically healed. This god-damned chaotic body. Jianshin could not help but curse. Only now did he realize that being too powerful was not necessarily a good thing. With a flip of his hand, Jianshin pulled out the ruler armament he had taken from the ancestor of the Hongfu clan, the dragon-slaying sword. He immediately poured his surging saint force into the dragon-slaying sword, causing it to shine with a dark light. He then viciously swung it at his left wrist. Immediately, a deep wound appeared on Jianshin's wrist from the dragon-slaying sword. Bright red blood immediately flowed out. Jianshin immediately placed his left hand on the white tiger's cocoon and allowed his blood to drip onto the cocoon for the white tiger to absorb. As soon as Jianshin's blood landed on the white cocoon, it immediately entered the cocoon and disappeared. With that, the energy within the white cocoon became even more powerful. Jianqin could clearly sense that the energy within the white tiger was rapidly changing after absorbing his blood. It seemed to have become even more powerful. With the blood of my chaotic body, it should be of great help to the white tiger. Jianqin thought to himself. Blood constantly flowed out from his wrist and was absorbed by the white tiger. However, Jianqin's chaotic body was just too powerful. In just 3 seconds, the wound on Jianqin's wrist had closed up completely. With no other choice, Jianqin could only use his ruler armament to cut his wrist again and use his blood as nourishment to speed up the white tiger's breakthrough. As Jianqin's blood was absorbed by the white tiger, the presence that the white tiger gave off became more and more powerful. The tremendous presence was filled with a sense of dominance, as if a king was slowly awakening from his slumber. The range of the presence expanded from 1,000 kilometers to 10,000 kilometers, alarming many of the participants. All the magical beasts in this area seemed to have been greatly frightened, including the magical beasts of the 6th step. All of them prostrated themselves on the ground, shivering. Their eyes were filled with fear, as if they had received a great shock. 100 kilometers away, Karalivi and the others all stopped. They all stared in the direction of the presence, in shock. A Class 5 magical beast can actually give off such a tremendous presence after breaking through to Class 6. Moreover, the presence is filled with a sense of dominance. This is definitely a beast king with a very great background, an old man from the Kara clan said with a deep voice. His face was filled with undisguised envy. Is the infant beast by Yang Yutian's side actually a beast of antiquity? The light in Karalivi's eyes flickered as she murmured. Several thousand kilometers away, a group of over 20 Radiant Saint Masters fought against 3 Class 6 magical beasts at the same time. Suddenly, a tremendous presence appeared in the distance, enveloping the entire region. With the sudden arrival of the presence, the 3 Class 6 magical beasts trembled violently. Their eyes immediately became filled with extreme fear, as if they had been greatly frightened. They whimpered and no longer had any interest in continuing the battle. They all fled as quickly as they could. The Radiant Saint Masters did not chase after them. Instead, they all looked in the direction of the presence. Their faces were filled with surprise. This should be the presence of a magical beast. I can clearly feel that the presence is filled with a sense of dominance. It looks like the origin of this magical beast is definitely not small. It's a beast king at the very least, an old man said with a deep voice. He was the leading Radiant Saint Master of the Tsar family, Zadalos. This presence isn't powerful. It should have just broken through from Class 5 to Class 6. However, it can scare away 3 Class 6 magical beasts and make them feel fear. This is definitely not something a beast king can do. In my opinion, it's extremely likely that this magical beast that has just broken through is a beast of antiquity. The person who spoke was an elegant, middle-aged man. He was the second disciple of the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union, Yun Tian, a beast of antiquity. I never thought that I would actually find a beast of antiquity here. Zadalos muttered in a low voice. His expression was filled with excitement, and intense greed appeared in his eyes. This beast of antiquity has clearly just broken through, so it shouldn't be very powerful. Elder Zadalos, if we bring this beast of antiquity back to the ancestor will definitely be extremely happy, a Radiant Saint Master from the Tsar clan said excitedly. Zadalos's eyes immediately lit up. He laughed aloud, that's right. If we bring this beast of antiquity back to the ancestor, it will be a great contribution. Let's go. We'll capture this beast of antiquity and bring it back to the Tsar clan later. At the same time, in a distant place within the artifact space, there was a sealed forest. In the center of the forest, a small wooden hut stood all by itself. There were traces of time on it, and within the hut, a bare-chested middle-aged man sat on the ground with his legs crossed. Suddenly, the middle-aged man's eyes snapped open. Immediately, 2 bolts of lightning shot out from his eyes, piercing 2 holes in the wooden hut. W, what is this presence? It's actually enough to make me shiver. The middle-aged man stood up from the ground. His face was filled with shock, and then he silently disappeared from the wooden house. When he reappeared, he was already at the edge of the small forest. In front of him, a powerful sealing force sealed off the sky and locked down the earth, preventing the middle-aged man from moving forward. The middle-aged man stood before the seal. His eyes were filled with shock as he stared at the distant space. He frowned as he sank into his thoughts.